Chapter 237. Li Tianlan abruptly woke up from his coma. The countless fights in the past 2 days had long exceeded his physical endurance. The so-called coma was extremely noisy for him. The light and shadow of the fire and lightning were flashing, the weapons were colliding, the crowd was roaring and screaming, and the dense sound of explosions was heard. Chaos. Absolute chaos. All the fighting scenes in the past 2 days seemed to have happened at the same time. It was oppressive and suffocating, and the chaos made people crazy. Li Tianlan woke up in the countless flashing scenes. He opened his eyes. It was silent all around. All the scenes began to disappear with his consciousness, but there was an indescribable palpitation suddenly breaking out in the depths of his heart. He was baffled, but his body was trembling and he was short of breath, as if he had lost the most valuable thing. What on earth was it? Awake? A low, hoarse voice suddenly sounded. It was very cold, but with a little soft tone. Yes. Li Tianlan responded in a low voice, still feeling the tension and palpitation brought by the crazy beating of his heart. After a while, he managed to calm down and realized that he was still on Tribulation's back. Tribulation's shoulders were not broad, but they were very stable. The thick night kept retreating as he moved forward. At this time, the two of them had left the forest and were walking quickly in a remote mountain area. "Martial uncle, I can get down." Li Tianlan moved on Tribulation's back. He was still extremely tired, but his injury had barely stabilized. The so-called stabilization meant that the injury did not continue to deepen, and some strength began to slowly recover. He exerted a little strength and directly jumped off Tribulation's back. As soon as his feet landed on the ground, his figure staggered. He took a deep breath and slowly stood firm. "How are you?" "Not bad," Li Tianlan said. He subconsciously glanced around and asked, "Where are we?" "Less than 15 kilometers from the place of the final battle." Tribulation's tone was calm and sharp. But as he spoke, Li Tianlan was surprised to find that his aura suddenly began to change. In the blink of an eye, Tribulation's figure seemed to have disappeared in the void and turned into nothingness. This change, it was not because Tribulation was too strong. On the contrary, it was because Tribulation suddenly became weak. Although Li Tianlan was seriously injured now, his realm had reached the half-step thunder-shocking realm. His absolutely abundant willpower was enough for him to exert great destructive power even when he only had a little power. In his extremely keen perception, he could clearly sense that Tribulation's aura was constantly retreating. Right now, Tribulation was like an ant in his perception. An ant that was completely ignored. "Martial uncle, your condition?" Li Tianlan's face suddenly changed. "I'm fine." Tribulation shook his head. As he spoke, his aura became strong again, and then weak again. The sharp and cold killing intent changed several times, and finally became completely silent. "Are you hurt?" "What happened?" Li Tianlan's frown deepened. Judging from Tribulation's current state, it was clear that he was seriously injured to the extreme. He couldn't even control his breath at all. If his injury got worse, his combat capability would almost be completely destroyed. "Don't worry. This is a necessary adjustment, not an injury." Tribulation snorted and took a deep breath. "Let's hurry up and get there." Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. When he was about to speak, Tribulation had already started to move. He didn't slow down, but the deathly still aura on him was getting weaker and weaker. Li Tianlan followed him forward. After a long silence, he suddenly asked, "Martial uncle, what's the situation now?" Tribulation stopped moving forward. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Not good. We're too slow, or they're too fast. The battle started the day your traces were exposed, but it's still a little late. We're making a big move in East Island now, and all the dark superpowers have started to take action. The situation is just as we predicted, the whole world is attacking East Island. The current situation in Changdao is pretty good." Then, Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows in surprise. But a large part of the special warfare elites of East Island trapped in Huading have begun to return. Although the power of East Island and Changdao is in danger, they can always hold on. But we don't have enough time. Tribulation's tone was clear and gloomy. Li Tianlan's face changed, and he couldn't say anything for a while. The situation in East Island was good. But Huading was in chaos. But the problem was that Wang Tianzong, Gu Xingyun, and the master of Samsara Palace, the three superiors of the invincible realm at the top of the divine list, were in Huading. How could Huading be in chaos? When Huading was in chaos, a large number of East Island elites trapped in Huading took the opportunity to break out and return to Changdao. This was definitely a disaster for the elites of Zhongzhou State in Changdao. This time, Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island because two invincible realm experts and countless elites of East Island were trapped in Huading. The special warfare force inside East Island was empty, so Zhongzhou State took the opportunity to attack. How strong were the forces trapped in Huading? Wang Tianzong, Gu Xingyun, and the master of Samsara Palace were in Huading in person. Once these people returned to East Island, the strength of East Island would even be invincible. After all, this was their home field. What the hell is going on? Li Tianlan's tone was solemn. The chaos started at the border. Annan State played a rebellion. Nominally, all the troops in the north were transferred to the south. But in fact, the five superpowers united with the mysterious armed forces in Annan State and invaded the border of Zhongzhou State, trying to destroy the Blood Battalion. They made a big move. This time, Arcis, the Saint War Angel of the Vatican, led the army with a murderous weapon. Wang Tianzong went to the border to suppress them with the human emperor. And the master of Samsara Palace. She was seriously injured and couldn't do anything. Gu Xingyun could only mobilize the third batch of elites who entered Changdao to guard Huading. The elites of East Island and Huading took the opportunity to break out. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but a considerable number of East Island elites took the opportunity to run away, including the two superiors of the invincible realm in East Island. Li Tianlan's heart sank. Somehow, he suddenly thought of the star flag in the camp where the Li family was. He asked subconsciously, how about the border? The border, Tribulation glanced at him and said, Senior Li did it himself. Besides, it said that there's a mysterious superior helping them. There should still be a fight at the border. Wang Tianzong and the mysterious superior returned to Huading as soon as Senior Li showed up, but they didn't have time. East Island took advantage of the time difference. When they returned, everything was almost settled. Li Tianlan opened his mouth and couldn't say anything for a while. He always felt that there was something wrong with this matter, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. After thinking about it, he said in a cautious tone, the other party seems to have grasped the timing very well. Someone betrayed the country and tipped them off. Of course, they grasped the timing very well. Tribulation said lightly, it's not just a matter of tipping off. The traitor even changed the code of the arsenal of the Border Control Corps. One after another, it finally changed the situation greatly. Now, everyone is in a difficult situation. Li Tianlan felt cold all over. This general trend that swept the whole dark world was a big picture. Whether it was in the light or in the dark, it involved too many things. Zhongzhou State, East Island, Samsara Palace, the five dark forces, Annan State, the traitor hiding in the dark, and the mysterious force that cooperated with Samsara Palace. The battlefield also spread from Asia to Europe and America. A slight change in one part could affect the whole body. The situation changed from advantage to disadvantage, and it kept changing. All the major forces, down to every single person, seemed to have become a densely packed chess piece. And the general trend was the chessboard. On the turbulent chessboard, behind the darkness, there seemed to be a black hand quietly pushing all this, completely connecting all the coincidences and accidents together, and finally pushing the chess pieces on the chessboard to achieve the result he wanted. Yes. There was only this black hand. It quietly used Zhongzhou State, East Island, all the dark forces, hundreds of thousands of troops, countless superiors, and everything was under the control of the other party. If that was really the case, how much courage did he have to have? How much effort did it take? Who was the other party? What did he want to do? Li Tianlan was silent, but the intuition in his heart was getting clearer and clearer. Everything he thought was intuition. Without evidence, it was hard to even say that the speculation was accurate. It was just intuition. But he believed it without a doubt. He glanced at Tribulation, and suddenly thought of Zhongzhou State, all the superiors, and a lot of things. One person, one force, one country. They were all players on the chessboard, and they were also chess pieces. But the Black Hand was secretly pushing the situation on the chessboard, and it even had the ability to overturn the chessboard at any time. What was more frightening was that so far, everyone was still in a state of confusion. Zhongzhou State seemed to have realized something, but it couldn't resist it. At least for now, Zhongzhou State had no choice. What they needed to do most was to completely destroy the current power of Changdao before those East Island elites came back from Huading. Now Zhongzhou State was not only fighting for victory, but also for time. And Tribulation seemed to know this, so he restrained all his aura and put himself in a state close to nirvana. In such a state, if he wasn't seriously injured, there was only one possibility. Tribulation. When Zhongzhou State needed power the most. He was about to break through. Martial uncle, do you think the master of Samsara Palace is seriously injured to the point that she can't fight? In the silence, Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Tribulation looked back at once. Chapter 238. Intentionally or unintentionally, Li Tianlan asked a seemingly ordinary but actually extremely sensitive question. A vague question. A clear answer. Tribulation looked at Li Tianlan quietly, his eyes shining and sharp. Li Tianlan just walked forward quietly, as if he was thinking, or hesitating. It was Dijiang, the first disciple of Wang Tianzong, who attacked you just now. It was Saint who saved you. After a long silence, Tribulation said calmly, what are you suspecting? Nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head and looked at Tribulation. Actually, I saw it. At that time, I was not completely unconscious. I saw Saint's sword. You didn't expect it, did you? Tribulation suddenly smiled. I really didn't expect it. Li Tianlan nodded. I didn't expect it to be him. How could it be him? He had never seen Saint's sword before, but the sword intent was so dazzling that Li Tianlan had already confirmed Saint's identity when the sword energy and Nirvana sword intent broke out. Saint's reputation, like his sword intent, was well known in the dark world. Such a person was willing to be the first super master of samsara. Although the identity of the first super master was transcendent enough, it was not as free as controlling a force by himself. This matter, Tribulation thought for a while and continued with a smile, this is samsara's own internal affairs. If you are interested, you might as well ask Saint himself in the future. Boss Qin probably knows something about it. The dark world is a game of chess. Every big shot is playing, and there is no retreat. Since you can't quit, it's good to make more preparations. Li Tianlan fell silent and said no more. He knew very well that on the chessboard of the dark world, the parties involved in the game could quit. The Li family was the representative of quitting in the middle of the game. Naturally, the result was terrible. Who is the master of Samsara Palace? Li Tianlan murmured to himself. You don't believe her. I can feel that you are even guarding against her. Tribulation said. There was no extra emotion in his tone, as if he was simply stating a fact. How can I believe her when I don't even know her true identity? In samsara, I only believe her. She. There was no need to ask who he was referring to. Martial uncle, have you heard of the name Dongqing Huangtu? Li Tianlan asked, looking straight ahead. At the end of his line of sight was a slightly higher hillside. There was light coming from behind the hillside, but because it was very far away, the light was a little blurry. Dongqing Huangtu. Were they from the Dongqing clan? Never heard of it. Tribulation was stunned for a moment and shook his head. Who is this man? Li Tianlan smiled and said calmly, I also want to know. Dongqing Huangtu. From all aspects, this person seemed to be someone who did not exist. But Li Tianlan had firmly believed that this person did exist, or had existed before. Zhuang Huayang had never heard of this name. Tribulation had never heard of this name. Li Beidian, Ning Qiancheng, and even Dongqing Qiuqi and Dongqing Yueshan from the Dongqing clan had never heard of this name. These were just a few people, but they were enough to encompass 3 eras. Dongqing Hanguang also said he didn't know. But Li Tianlan knew very well that the old master of the Dongqing clan did not tell him the truth. At first, Li Tianlan was just curious about the name. But as things developed, especially the unusual behavior of Samsara Palace, he felt the importance of the name more and more. Samsara Palace must have something to do with Dongqing Huangtu. The master of Samsara Palace now seemed to be helping the Li family, but behind all kinds of things, who could be sure that she was helping the Li family? Or was she helping the hidden heavenly sun behind everyone's eyes? Most importantly, in his repressed memory, he seemed to have heard his grandfather mention this name. The Li family, the Dongqing clan, and the Samsara Palace. Vaguely, there seemed to be a line that connected the 3 superpowers together. And the name Dongqing Huangtu was the key of the key. If he could figure out this key, he could basically figure out what role Samsara played in the plot of Zhongzhou State, and even the final outcome of the final battle of Changdao. Was the black hand that was pushing the chessboard in his intuition the Samsara Palace? If it was the Samsara Palace, then what was Qin Weibai, who could represent the will of the master of Samsara Palace most of the time, doing? Li Tianlan did not dare to think about this question, nor did he want to think about it. What are you thinking about? Tribulation's deep voice suddenly sounded. Nothing. Li Tianlan came to his senses and said softly with emotion, I just feel that I'm not strong enough. If I'm strong enough, I can use my absolute strength to lift up all the fog in front of me and shatter everything. If he was strong enough, at your age, your achievements are enough to scare a lot of people. And you are recultivating. Although your current state is supported by drugs, if you were in your heyday, you would be one of the forces that could decide the outcome of the battle. Even if you met Dijiang, the first disciple of Wang Tianzong, you would still be able to fight back. Tianlan, you will enter the invincible realm sooner or later, you want. Tribulation rarely talked so much, but this time, he was suddenly interrupted by Li Tianlan before he finished. Invincible realm? Martial uncle, do you know when the concept of invincible realm was first put forward? Tribulation suddenly fell silent, as if he was thinking and hesitating. It's not a secret. Li Tianlan answered his own question. Invincible realm can be said to be the peak of martial arts in the past 500 years, and martial arts was officially divided into realms for the first time. According to records, the first invincible realm expert in 500 years was not from Zhongzhou State, but from Star State. He was the god of war of Star State more than 400 years ago. He was also the one who formally put forward the concept of 4 realms of martial arts and invincible realm, and it prevailed in the whole dark world. Tribulation was still silent. At this moment, he seemed to know what Li Tianlan wanted to say, but he was a little uncertain. 4 realms of martial arts. Invincible realm. In the end, it's just a concept. Or rather, it was just a path. How vast is martial arts? How can a road be completely summarized? The reason why the cultivation of 4 realms of martial arts prevailed in the dark world is that it can improve people's combat effectiveness faster and clarify their goals. In the journey of martial arts exploration, a clear goal means enough motivation. If there is no 4 realms of martial arts, then when a person reaches the peak of ice condensing realm, he will not know the next realm is fire flaming realm. Without a goal, how can he cultivate? Such a concept is good. But it's not without disadvantages. Li Tianlan paused, glanced at Tribulation, and continued, for example, Martial Uncle, you only cultivate the chi-controlling realm, but now you are the top superior of the half-step invincible realm, and even have the combat capability of the invincible realm. This is enough to show that the concept of 4 realms of martial arts is not perfect. At the very least, the critical point of breaking through to the ice-condensing realm in the chi-controlling realm is not the real limit of the chi-controlling realm. He is just a goal. If you don't look at this goal and continue to walk in the chi-controlling realm, you can still be invincible. Tribulation finally opened his mouth and said flatly, the concept of martial arts has never been perfect. Indeed. Li Tianlan smiled and said, so I have been thinking about a question since I was very young. For 500 years, the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai can be said to be the only heavenly son. Although the founder of Xuanyuantai didn't have the title of Heavenly Son, he also had the combat capability of the Heavenly Son. If they were born in this era, who would be stronger between them and today's so-called superior of the invincible realm? Tribulation finally confirmed his inner guess and chuckled. You already have the answer, right? Yes. Li Tianlan also laughed. In the night, his laughter was not loud, but his whole person bloomed with a kind of inexplicable brilliance. The invincible realm is the peak of martial arts today. But maybe many people forget that the first invincible realm expert in history is actually a shame. There is a clear record of this in the map of God of War of Xuanyuantai. About 30 years after the death of the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai, the founder of Xuanyuantai also reached his old age. The first superior of the invincible realm in history, the god of war of Star State, was also born in this background. He put forward the concept of the 4 realms of martial arts. After he reached the advanced level of martial arts, he went east to Zhongzhou State and challenged the founder of Xuanyuantai who never knew what the 4 realms of martial arts were. In Li Tianlan's calm words, Tribulation's breathing unconsciously became rapid. This kind of emotion, it was like excitement. The founder of Xuanyuantai accepted the challenge. Tribulation said. Although this matter was recorded in the map of God of War, it was not a top secret for the whole dark world. It was just that few people knew it. Yes. Li Tianlan smiled and said, in the battle in the past, in the face-to-face confrontation, the founder only used one sword move. That was definitely the most amazing sword move in hundreds of years. The magnificence of that sword move really shone through the ages. Even today, 500 years later, it was not inferior at all. Tribulation's eyes were full of fascination. He knew the result after that sword move. Back then, the so-called god of war of Star State, the first superior of the invincible realm, was directly smashed into blood mist under that sword move before he had time to make a move. The invincible realm. Who was the real invincible realm? I have only recently figured out a truth. The invincible realm is just the goal. Martial arts is just the foundation. The 4 realms of martial arts are just a path, just a path. The invincible realm is a realm. But the invincible realm is not. Li Tianlan said softly. The residential area on the verge of demolition was as quiet as a ghost town in the night. The heavy rain spread from the east. The sound of the rain shrouded the field, and the rain gradually swept to the battlefield. The thunder in the sky kept rolling. The heavy rain was majestic. A pale bolt of lightning streaked across the sky without a sound. The residential area shrouded in darkness was abruptly illuminated for a moment. Against the pale background of the whole world, the figure, which was originally integrated with the night and the void, suddenly became extremely eye-catching. In the heavy rain, the black shadow appeared in front of the dilapidated corridor. A white dress involuntarily followed the black shadow and landed on the ground. The white dress fluttered in the wind and rain at night like a fairy. She stood quietly behind the black shadow. There was no extra expression on her perfect dreamy face, but her bright eyes flashed with clear and sharp light. In the night rain, even standing behind someone, she still had a kind of peerless aura, calm and calm. I like the rain. The vague black shadow suddenly spoke with a soft voice, sounding ethereal and elegant. Because the rain can eliminate all traces. It is not good for tracking, but good for stealth. Qin Weibai tilted her head. Her bright eyes looked at the heavy rain in the sky in the blink of an eye. Her red lips raised slightly, revealing a cold and mocking smile. Are you afraid? Now I am really afraid. There was a smile in the black shadow's tone. After all, for me, tonight is an unexpected gain, but it's not a big deal. In 2 days, I will send you to where you should go. When you become my second sister-in-law, you and my second brother's children will call me third uncle. Ha, what should I be afraid of? Qin Weibai was silent. Even though the atmosphere wasn't very friendly, there wasn't the slightest hint of panic on her face, only indifference. It was an exquisite, dazzling, dreamy face. It was sharp, cold, and had a soul-stirring charm. Do you deserve it? Qin Weibai finally spoke, but her tone was simple. Whether I deserve it or not, when my second sister-in-law comes home, you will know. Even if you don't want to, so what? My second brother has been dreaming of you. If you marry into our family, I don't think he will mind using force on a weak woman like you. It may become more interesting this way. The black shadow said with a smile. You have to wait until your second brother can come back alive from Zhongzhou state. Qin Weibai sneered. In the face of the only invincible realm killer in the dark world, her figure looked so weak and helpless, but her momentum was sharp to the extreme. The black shadow's laughter stopped. He was silent for a while, then said blandly, It seems that you know who I am. Jiang Qianxie, codename Evil, the top killer in the dark world, the third master of the Jiang family of South America. Your second brother is Jiang Qinyan, right? Is it hard to guess? Another muffled thunder rolled through the sky. Pale lightning fell immediately. In the flash of light and shadow, Qin Weibai clearly saw Evil's eyes narrow. The information of Samsara Palace is really unexpected. Evil stared at Qin Weibai in front of him and sighed softly. Qin Weibai glanced at him, said nothing, and walked directly. She never thought of running away, which was tantamount to asking for humiliation. When military counselor sent human emperor to Li Tianlan, and Evil appeared for the first time, she had already known that at this time, the word running away had become a joke. She walked directly into the corridor, and without looking back, she asked, Which floor? There was a flash of brilliance in Evil's eyes. No wonder his second brother was so infatuated with her. At least from the time she was captured to the present, her performance was indeed generous and arrogant enough, which was completely different from ordinary women. It's on the first floor, on the left. Evil said in a playful tone. Qin Weibai knocked on the door without saying anything. An ordinary-looking woman with an intoxicating charm gently pushed open the door. When she saw Qin Weibai standing at the door, she froze for a moment. Then she pursed her lips and chuckled softly. Boss Qin, welcome. I'm Rose. She spoke softly and slightly opened her body. Qin Weibai walked into the room calmly. The condition of the residential area that was about to be demolished was naturally not very good. All the furniture had been half empty, and only a few candles were burning in the room. In the living room, there was a shabby tea table that could be treated as garbage, and there was a chessboard on the tea table. When Rose came to open the door, the other woman sitting on the other side of the chessboard did not move, but just stared at the chessboard in front of her. In the night rain, the two women seemed to be playing chess. Make me a cup of tea. Qin Weibai naturally sat on the opposite side of the chessboard and ordered indifferently. Rose was a little stunned. And the woman sitting motionless in front of the chessboard also seemed to be stunned, and narrowed her eyes to look at Qin Weibai. You go. Qin Weibai did not look at Rose, but at the woman in front of her with a kind of arrogance, and ordered coldly. Yuehua, why don't you go and make tea for second madam? Evil came in from behind and ordered coldly. Yuehua snorted coldly, stared at Qin Weibai, and stood up reluctantly. The place is a little shabby, so I have to trouble you. When you come to South America, the Jiang family will do its best to entertain you. Evil sat on the opposite side of Qin Weibai, looked at the chessboard in front of him, and said with a smile. I still say the same thing. Jiang Qianyan doesn't deserve me, and neither does the Jiang family of South America. I can go back with you, but if you are willing to stay here with me and waste time, I'm afraid the Jiang family of South America will be wiped out in the Battle of Changdao. Ha, the Battle of Changdao. Evil suddenly laughed, squinted at Qin Weibai, and said softly, what is that? Only a few other idiotic forces wanted to get a share of the benefits. The goal of the Jiang family of South America has never been the Battle of Changdao, nor East Island. Chapter 239. Outside the window, it was raining cats and dogs. The rumbling rain shook every corner of Changdao. The candlelight in the apartment without power was swaying slightly. The soft and tiny halo spread out and illuminated the chessboard, but the whole living room looked darker and darker outside the halo. Evil's soft and almost cold voice rang across Qin Weibai. It was very close, but it seemed to pass through the wind and rain and the halo of the candlelight. Between the lines, there was a kind of unspeakable weirdness and ghastly feeling. The old apartment was not big, but its force was quite strong. Evil, Moonlight, and Rose, even the weakest among them, Rose was a superior close to the half-step invincible realm. Such a lineup was strong to outsiders, but for Qin Weibai, who was a captive, it was the biggest crisis. Qin Weibai was still as calm as water. That was a kind of coldness and calmness that came from inside out. She slowly gathered her white skirt, looked at the unfinished chess pieces in front of her, and said softly, Are you thinking about Samsara Palace? That's our main purpose this time. At this point, Evil thought he had everything under control, so his words became very calm. The final battle of Changdao is nothing. Even if we win in the end and get the right to speak in the special warfare system of East Island, so what? Not only will we disperse our forces, but we also have to guard against Zhongzhou state and even fight with the royal family. I don't deny the huge benefits, but there are also a lot of troubles. It will take at least many years to digest all this. The Jiang family of South America has no patience and is not interested in these things. Qin Weibai looked at him strangely. Her eyes flickered, and she said thoughtfully, Do you think it will be easier to deal with Samsara Palace than to occupy Changdao? It's not easy. But now it's different. Evil's cold laughter echoed in the living room. He casually grabbed a chess piece and played with it in his hand. He said in a playful tone, Samsara Palace is the fastest growing force in recent years. In the past, the Jiang family of South America naturally wouldn't want to provoke it easily. But now there's a variable. The chess piece rubbed in his hand and made a sharp sound, but Evil's tone was getting calmer and calmer. To be honest, I didn't expect Boss Qin to show up in Changdao. This is really a surprise. Our first target was Li Tianlan. Her Highness the Palace Master and Boss Qin both care about that nonentity. As long as we bring him back, we won't have to worry about dealing with your samsara. I didn't expect that Boss Qin cared about him so much that he even came to Changdao in person. He stood up and waved his hand in the shadows, but his eyes flashed with a fiery light. It was the excitement of seeing great benefits and beautiful prospects. President Qin, I'm curious. How arrogant can you be when you view all men as dirt? In the eyes of countless people, you are an otherworldly fairy. Why would you fall for a nonentity like Li Tianlan? Look, what a good opportunity this is. I've caught you now. If I catch Li Tianlan, do you still have room to resist? He sat back down and sneered, so what if second brother doesn't deserve you? As long as Li Tianlan falls into our hands, as long as you still care, then you have no choice. At that time, in order to let the man you love live a little better, you might even take the initiative to climb into second brother's bed. Qin Weibai chuckled. Under the illumination of the candlelight, her exquisite, dreamy face carried a kind of dazzling holiness and coldness in the subtle light. Do you still want to say? She looked at Evil and said calmly, when the Jiang family of South America gets me, then use Tianlan to threaten me to deal with Samsara Palace? I haven't been in samsara for a long time, but I can still influence some of the 12 supermasters. If Samsara Palace loses the 12 supermasters, will you attack the whole Samsara Palace by following the clues? Well, it won't take too long. My sister is still seriously injured. Maybe during her recovery, the Jiang family of South America will do all this. At that time, my sister will be all alone, and at most, she will only have some defeated soldiers by her side. And your Jiang family of South America, with 3 brothers in the invincible realm and murderous weapons in hand, won't be afraid of my sister's revenge at all. Is that right? Evil rubbed the chess piece in his hand quietly and didn't say anything. Qin Weibai continued, and because I'm in your hands, my sister will be afraid to take action, so it's hard for her to take revenge at all costs. At that time, you will force me to agree to marry Jiang Qianyan, and naturally invite my sister to join the Jiang family of South America, giving her a position that can even be on an equal footing with your elder brother. It may take a long time to turn enemies into allies, so as to swallow Samsara Palace, but it's worth it, right? Boss Qin is really smart. Evil said indifferently. He was not surprised that Qin Weibai could think of this. When the will of the master of Samsara Palace was silent, Qin Weibai was the spokesperson of Samsara Palace. Even if such a person didn't know martial arts, no one dared to doubt her mind. And if she wasn't smart, she wouldn't have made a big plan to destroy the powerful Night Spirit a few months ago. In that battle, in addition to the absolute strength of the master of Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai's long-term arrangement behind the scenes was also indispensable. The plan is okay. Qin Weibai nodded and commented, it's not brilliant, but it grasps the weakness of Samsara Palace. No wonder you take it for granted. Take it for granted? Evil raised his eyebrows, and his tone was a little gloomy. In other words, it's a pipe dream. Qin Weibai said slowly. Footsteps sounded on the other side of the living room. Moonlight, who was extremely beautiful in black, came over with a cup of tea. She put the tea beside Qin Weibai gently, but her tone was a little meaningful. Second madam, please have some tea. Qin Weibai finally frowned, and there was a hint of annoyance between her eyebrows. It seemed that she was extremely unhappy with the title, Second Madam. Swish. She picked up the teacup and directly raised her hand without saying a word. The whole cup of tea, together with the teacup, suddenly flew toward Moonlight. However, her action was too obvious, and her strength was too delicate. Before the tea touched Moonlight's body, Moonlight moved her fingers slightly, and a subtle electric arc flashed. The tea was suddenly completely evaporated, and the teacup also turned into powder, fluttering in the candlelight. Get out. Qin Weibai's tone was cold and even a little gloomy. She had always been calm, but for the first time, she showed a little strength, which was extremely dazzling. She was a captive, but in the face of the 3 masters, at this moment, Qin Weibai was more like a master. Moonlight's eyes narrowed, and her killing intent surged. She did not step back. Second sister-in-law, Moonlight is not a servant. She is one of the visiting professors of the Jiang family of South America, and also my second brother's favorite concubine. If you sisters don't unite and get along, you will be spanked in the future, ha 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 ha. Evil laughed presumptuously and winked at Yu Hua. Moonlight retreated with a cold face. Qin Weibai was also smiling. Her smile was beautiful, like a blooming flower. However, everyone could feel the coldness and anger behind her smile. Remember what you said. Qin Weibai's tone was calm, not ostentatious, not sharp, more like an irresistible judgment. No one dares to talk to me like this. You will pay the price, and so will the Jiang family of South America. Second sister-in-law, you are so domineering. Evil sneered with a fake smile. But here, you'd better accept your fate. My fate is in my own hands. Qin Weibai's eyes were shining, but behind the brilliance was indifference. In your hands? Evil sneered. If it's really in your hands, why are you here? Because I need to be here, so I was caught by you. Qin Weibai looked at Evil and sneered. Otherwise, What do you think it is? The general trend is like a chessboard. You are high above, and each of you thinks you are a chess player. I am different. I am willing to be a chess piece. When necessary, I want to be here, so I am here. No one can stop me. She picked up a chess piece, put it on the chessboard, and pointed at the place where she put it. Like this. I don't believe it. Evil was silent for a long time, and then said with a smile. He looked down at the chessboard, put down a chess piece, and said coldly, "Second sister-in-law can't control the situation of this game, let alone the general trend. The result has been decided. What can you do? The result has not been decided. Even if I lose, at least I can still." She suddenly reached out her hand and turned over the chessboard in front of Evil's astonished eyes. The black and white chess pieces flew up in the flickering candlelight and fell to the ground. The sound was as clear as the rainstorm outside the window. Qin Weibai leaned forward slightly. At that moment, Evil, who had entered the invincible realm, subconsciously shrank back. Qin Weibai stood up with a cold smile and said blandly, "I am here, watching your plan. Tianlan is a variable, and I am the key. Do you really think you can catch Tianlan? You can kill him, but you will never catch him. Don't deny it." She said coldly, "He is my man. Do you know my man better than I do?" The anger in Evil's tone began to grow. He sat up straight and said in a deep voice, "You really don't care about Li Tianlan's life or death?" "I do." Qin Weibai's tone was clear. Thunder rolled outside the window. Her voice was as cold as the pale lightning shining outside the window, without sadness or joy. "Then let him die." Evil's body shook. It was incredible. Qin Weibai's eyes softened quietly. In fact, many people, even saint and military counselor, didn't know that she cooperated with the mysterious highness in East Island not to let the mysterious organization completely ensure Li Tianlan's safety. On the surface, a consortium was used as a bargaining chip, but in the dark, countless contributions were made. How could she just want Li Tianlan to be safe and sound? What she wanted was more after Li Tianlan's death. If a man didn't die once, how could he make a great breakthrough? The rain fell in every corner of Changdao. In the heavy rain that almost blinded people, a middle-aged monk in plain monk robes walked along the airport highway and came to a medium-sized villa area in the western suburbs of Changdao. The rain was heavy. The heavy rain fell from the sky, but it bounced off the air 5 or 6 meters away from the monk. He was still dry in the rain. He looked at the villa in front of him and walked directly to the gate. A black luxury car drove over from the gate and finally stopped in front of the monk. The bright car lights shone on the monk's face. The monk didn't move, just put his palms together and saluted. A handsome, almost enchanting man quickly got out of the car and came to the monk. In the rain, his cold voice seemed to soften a little. "I'm Daybreak. Nice to meet you, master." The monk saluted again and said apologetically, "I'm Rui. There was an accident, so I came a little late." Daybreak's expression changed. He pulled the monk into the car and asked with concern, "How is Great Master Wu?" "Master," Rui said softly. He looked sad and said no more. Daybreak's heart sank, but he didn't say anything more. He changed the topic and said with a smile, "His Highness is waiting for you. You came later than scheduled, but it's okay." The car drove quickly in the rain and finally stopped in front of a villa in the center of the villa area. Along the way, the whole villa was silent, but it was brightly lit. Countless raindrops became clearer in the continuous lights. The whole villa area seemed to be suppressing something with the rain. Rui observed silently without saying a word. Another enchanting man who looked slightly like Daybreak came over and opened the car door for Rui. He said with a smile, "Master, I'm Dawn." "I am Dawn, please." Rui nodded silently, touched the things in his arms, and walked to the villa. Dawn and Daybreak didn't go in. They stood in front of the door, looking at the rain in front of them, quietly waiting for the result of this quiet but very important meeting. Finally, Daybreak said softly in a complicated tone. It's about time. Dawn looked at the brightly lit villa area in front of him and said in a low tone. He was silent for a while and then said softly, Brother, do you think His Highness can get what he wants? How do I know? Daybreak was silent for a while and finally shook his head. He knew what Dawn was talking about. After returning to Changdao from Ninghu, His Highness had been staying in this villa alone. He didn't eat or say a word. Their young master, Huawu, was dead. No one could imagine how sad and desperate His Highness was when he heard this news. It was just a few days' difference. If it was a few days later, their young master, the teenager named Huawu, would be born in the final battle. The name of the heavenly son, just a few days later. This time, Rui, the disciple of great master Wu Wei, the metaphysics grandmaster of Zhongzhou state, came to Changdao, which was part of the plan. But now His Highness wanted to find out who killed Huawu. Great Master Wu Wei might have the ability to give clues about this matter. But this was out of the plan. Was Great Master Wu Wei really willing to help? If he really knew the murderer, would His Highness vent his anger on the enemy? Or would he focus on the final battle? After being silent for many years, there was no one in the world that His Highness couldn't defeat. His anger. Daybreak looked a little pale and didn't know what to say for a while. Great Master Wu Wei gave us a name. It should be in line with the general trend. Brother, what do you think our organization will be called in the future? Dawn changed the topic and asked. Daybreak smiled and said slowly, We'll know in a minute. It was quiet in the villa. The monk walked into the hall of the villa and saw the man sitting on the sofa for the first time. He didn't sit in the middle of the sofa, but in a corner. But the feeling he gave off was too real, so real that even though his appearance was not outstanding, he could still make people notice his existence at first glance. Greetings, Your Highness. Rui took the initiative to pack his luggage with a calm expression. Master Rui is too polite. The mysterious Highness's tone was calm and low. He didn't seem to be in a good mood. He glanced at Rui and said straightforwardly, Have you brought it? Rui nodded as usual, took out a letter from his arms, and handed it over respectfully. His Highness waved his hand, and the envelope fell directly into his hand. Without hesitation, he tore open the envelope. There was only a very simple piece of white paper in the envelope. 8 simple words were juxtaposed on the white paper. The rest were blank. The origin of the purgatory, God lives in heaven capital. Only these 8 words. His Highness looked at it silently and didn't speak for a long time. His question was not answered, and his invitation was not responded. No response was also a response. Thank Great Master Wu Wei for me. His Highness said slowly after a long silence. I have one more thing to ask, Your Highness. Rui stood where he was and said softly. Please go ahead. His Highness's eyes were still fixed on the 8 words on the paper, and his tone was calm. I hope Your Highness can help a person. Rui's expression was calm. But His Highness's fingers holding the letter froze slightly. He slowly turned his head and looked at Rui in front of him. After a long time, he said indifferently, How can I help him? He didn't ask who that person was. He knew without asking. Just like Your Highness did in those days, I hope Your Highness can help me. Rui's tone was dull, as plain as tasteless water, without any personal emotion. His Highness looked at the middle-aged monk in front of him quietly, and his eyes gradually became cold. It was not a direct anger, but more like a kind of anger. I also have one thing to ask, Master. He tapped the paper beside his hand and said softly, I want to know who killed Huawu. Rui was silent. They looked at each other for a while, and then Rui looked away and said calmly, There is an answer in the letter. There were only 8 words on the letter. The origin of the purgatory, God lives in heaven capital. There was nothing else. No answer was the answer. His Highness didn't seem to be smart, or he was extremely persistent. He stared straight at Rui, waved his hand, and the letter floated directly in front of Rui. The paper was suspended in the air, and the pages stretched straight in the air. "I can't see the answer," he said. "Master Rui, if you see it, please tell me." He said word by word, "Who on earth killed Huawu?" Rui sighed softly, put his palms together, and said, "Since there is no answer, I can't say it." "Why are you so persistent, Your Highness?" "Can't say it." "Not can't say it." His Highness's eyes suddenly surged with a trace of fire, and he said in a deep voice, "That's my son." Rui stopped talking and stood still, keeping the posture of putting his palms together, and was as silent as a statue. His Highness suddenly smiled. That smile was real and bright, but his eyes were full of indifference. "Since you don't allow me, why should I help others?" He looked at Rui and asked very seriously. In Rui's silence, he suddenly stood up and said angrily, "Why should I help others?" Boundless sharp sword intent burst out around him in an instant. The sword intent swept through every space in the living room. Rui's monk robe was cut one after another, and his body was dripping with blood. Dense sword marks fell on the wall, and the whole living room was full of sword intent. That person has wind and thunder veins, that person wants to make great achievements, that person is called the Heavenly Son. What about Huawu? Does my son deserve to die? Huawu is dead, and I want to take revenge, but the master doesn't allow me? He doesn't allow me, so why should I help him help that person? Why? That person deserves to die. He deserves to die the most. His Highness's voice was bold and aggressive. He looked at Rui coldly and said firmly, "I don't accept it." "Why?" "Responsibility." Rui, who was covered in blood, looked as usual and said calmly, "Your Highness has your responsibility." His Highness suddenly became silent and didn't speak for a long time. After a long time, he opened his mouth and said coldly, "I just don't accept it." Rui chanted the name of Buddha, bowed slightly, and sighed. Master said to be impartial. He didn't look at his Highness's expression or at the blood on his body, and turned to leave the villa. His Highness didn't stop him. Impartial. Heh. What a good impartial. The sneer on his face faded little by little, but his eyes were shining with stubborn light. Rui's figure walked out of the villa. The sound of the door closing came behind him. Chapter 240. What was the place of the final battle? When Li Tianlan asked Tribulation, his answer was simple: climb over the mountain in front of you. The undulating mountains were not actually peaceful. East Island used a lot of manpower to deal with the final battle. Countless patrol squads were scattered all over the battlefield. Tribulation and Li Tianlan, who deliberately suppressed their state, kept detouring in the mountains. It took them 2 hours to get close to the edge of the mountains, which was more than 10 kilometers away. The heavy rain swept the whole battlefield without warning. The messy water splashed down from high places. Under the sky, the mountains were hazy. The hillside in front of them, which had become clear gradually, was hidden in the rain again and became more and more blurred. The two of them kept speeding up in the heavy rain. In the end, they were walking in a straight line. At the most critical moment of the heavy rain, fighting and killing had become the only melody in Changdao. There was no pure land in the battlefield. Before Li Tianlan climbed over the hillside in front of him, the fierce battle had spread to the inside of the mountains. The rain was getting heavier, but the sound of the rain had disappeared here. Amidst the splashing rain, there were frenzied and concentrated gunshots and explosions everywhere. The loud noises completely drowned out the torrential rain. Occasionally, there would be an unwilling and angry roar, but it was quickly drowned out by the sound of explosions that filled the entire battlefield. Fine lightning flashed in the air. The moment the whole mountain was illuminated, several figures rushed up from the other side of the hillside. The rain was pouring down. A thick ice wall suddenly appeared less than 100 meters away from Li Tianlan. The ice walls were like 4 walls, completely covering the few people who had rushed into the mountain area. The sword intent danced and flashed in the cage formed by the ice walls. Gunshots rang out for a moment and then died away. In the flashing sound, the 4 huge ice walls completely shattered under the invisible pressure. Several corpses were thrown out with a lot of broken ice. A quiet and pretty figure stood quietly in the heavy rain. She looked around at the corpses around her. It should have been a very delicate and lovely figure, but at this time, in the heavy rain, she had an indescribable coldness. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. The woman in the rain saw him at the same time. Under the cover of the heavy rain, her body slightly stiffened, and there seemed to be panic in her eyes. Qingyan. Li Tianlan took a few steps forward and finally saw the woman in front of him. He said in a surprised voice, "Why are you here? Aren't you with Qiancheng?" Brother Li, amidst the chaos, Yu Qingyan, who had gotten together with Ning Qiancheng in a very short time, smiled sweetly. Her voice carried the unique brightness and joy of a young girl. "You're really fine." Everyone was worried to death. Tribulation walked up to Li Tianlan silently and said nothing. Yu Qingyan, who did not notice the existence of tribulation at all, was startled. She bowed and said obediently, "Hello, teacher." Tribulation nodded and said nothing. He just looked at Yu Qingyan in front of him with an unfathomable look. Li Tianlan did not notice this. He frowned briefly and asked calmly, "How is everyone now?" "Not so good." Yu Qingyan lowered her head and looked at the water falling in front of her. She whispered, "Many people have died, but we are all fine. I worked together with Qiancheng, as well as some elites from the Eastern Theater of Operations, but we were separated just now. I'm going to look for him now. Big Brother Li, are you coming with me?" Li Tianlan was stunned and then glanced at Tribulation. Tribulation was still staring at Yu Qingyan. Noticing Li Tianlan's movement, he shook his head and said, "Nothing will happen for the time being. You go back with me first." Li Tianlan nodded. He was really not in a good state now. At least, he had to deal with some wounds completely. "You go first. Contact me anytime if you need anything." Li Tianlan looked at Yu Qingyan and said. Yu Qingyan was also a member of the East Emperor Palace. But at present, the East Emperor Palace did not have its own communication system. The system they used belonged to Sai City. However, Li Tianlan's equipment was completely damaged in the battle, so he had to get a replacement as soon as possible after returning. "Okay. Take care of yourself, Big Brother Li," Yu Qingyan wrinkled her nose and instructed in a serious tone. Li Tianlan nodded with a smile and went straight to the hillside ahead with Tribulation. The intense and scattered gunshots echoed in the night rain, getting clearer and crazier. The moment they were about to climb the hillside, Li Tianlan suddenly turned back. In his sight, Yu Qingyan was still standing there quietly not far away. Her eyes were like a pool of clear water without any ripples, soft and quiet, innocent and pure, with a little confusion. Noticing Li Tianlan's gaze, she smiled sweetly again and waved at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan remained calm and quietly watched Yu Qingyan turn around and go farther and farther in the night rain. "This girl is not simple," Tribulation suddenly said. "She is Yu Donglai's granddaughter. Elder Yu was one of Grandpa's guards in those days. His descendants are trustworthy," Li Tianlan said calmly and casually. In his sight, Yu Qingyan's figure seemed to be speeding up. Her shadow became more and more blurred and finally disappeared in the depths of the night rain. But she was still moving forward. The heavy rain drenched her, who had not yet entered the fire-flaming realm, but her eyes were always clear and bright. She had been moving at the fastest speed to the other side of the mountain with great clarity. Forward. Turning. Roundabout. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. Yu Qingyan was the only one walking silently in the whole mountain, patient and persistent. In the rain, she walked at the fastest speed for 7 or 8 kilometers. After confirming that no one was following her, she turned around and lightly set foot on the road on the other side of the mountain. Then she turned back. The road was slippery and straight leading forward. There were mountains on both sides of the road. Less than a kilometer ahead, there was an intersection. Turning left at the intersection and walking forward for 500 meters, she should see a small and ancient road marker. Yu Qingyan silently calculated and moved forward. Under the night rain, her figure was lonely and at a loss, like a lost elf. Everything was consistent with the information she had. Turning left at the intersection, this road would eventually lead to the outside of the battlefield. The road marker she was looking for stood quietly on the side of the road, lonely and inconspicuous. Yu Qingyan stood silently in front of the road marker and reached out to touch the wet stone marker. After hesitating for a long time, her slender palm exerted a little force, as if she wanted to pull the stone marker up. Ahem, a light cough sounded behind her and clearly passed through the rain. Like a frightened rabbit, Yu Qingyan turned around abruptly and looked behind her. A woman who looked about 30 years old appeared behind Yu Qingyan. Red leggings, a red women's shirt, and red high-heeled shoes. Under the heavy rain, the woman was like a flame burning proudly in the rain. Arrogant. This was the most obvious label on her. Yu Qingyan's eyes were flustered, but she bravely looked at the woman in red in front of her. This scene should not have happened in the plan. Now all this made her a little confused. What are you hesitating for? The woman in red said with a mocking look. Her face was extremely beautiful, which combined with her extremely proud temperament, suddenly made her look wild and gorgeous that made people crazy. This belongs to us. His Highness gave it to your grandfather for safekeeping for the time being. What are you hesitating for now? The woman in red said in a light tone. She was about the same height as Yu Qingyan, but standing together, she had an obvious condescending feeling. That's because no one will do better than my grandfather. That's why you chose us. That's all. Yu Qingyan plucked up the courage to look at the woman in red in front of her and said. So what? The woman in red's tone was cold. She reached out to Yu Qingyan and said, Give it to me. Yu Qingyan hesitated for a while, and finally began to reach into her pocket and took out a crystal-clear bottle from it. This bottle was extremely small, but it was bright and resplendent. Its entire body was made of the highest quality crystal. 2 drops of indescribably magnificent fiery red liquid were contained in the bottle. The luster reflected off it, and a small part of the night sky nearby was reflected into a fiery red. The woman in red took the bottle and carefully put it away. She looked at Yu Qingyan and said coldly, We shouldn't have met today, but you hesitated for too long. Go back and tell your grandfather that he'd better keep the things that don't belong to him. If he dares to have other ideas, she did not continue, but left behind a meaningful sneer. Yu Qingyan bit her lip and did not speak. The woman took a deep look at her, turned around and walked into the rain again. The meeting between the two sides was extremely hasty. It was like a deal, but also like a tacit understanding that was difficult for people to understand. Both the woman in red and Yu Qingyan knew what was in the bottle. It was the hottest poison in the dark world, codenamed Suzaku blood. The woman in red also knew Yu Qingyan's name, origin, and all the background. But Yu Qingyan did not know that the woman in red's codename was Phoenix. Chapter 241. Li Tianlan finally climbed the hillside in the increasingly crazy rainstorm that seemed to drown Changdao. Behind the hillside was a vast and flat plain. The scenes of chaotic fighting and killing that he had imagined didn't appear. Instead, there was darkness and rain everywhere in front of Li Tianlan. Intense gunshots came from all directions. In the closest place to his line of sight, he could vaguely see the silhouettes of people fighting together. He couldn't tell which faction they belonged to. The air was violently distorted. Countless raindrops were like swords, splashing in all directions. One after another, ice walls rose in the night rain and then shattered. Occasionally, there was a fire in the distance. It burned fiercely for a moment and then went out. Blood splashed near Li Tianlan and instantly blended with the rain. The blood was hot. The rain was cold. Manic and angry roars sounded from time to time, as if they would never stop. The flat road was completely smashed in the battle. The green turf was lifted into the air. The tall trees fell down one by one. The flashing bullets flew back and forth in the air like shooting stars. Fighting, killing, bathing in blood, risking one's life. The final battle seemed to be white-hot, but it was unexpectedly messy. There were no tragic and heroic collisions between thousands of people. It seemed that it would never be the style of the Dark World. On this vast battlefield, a large number of elites were scattered in different places. When the battle was unprecedentedly fierce, Li Tianlan stood on a high place and felt that most of the place was empty. This is just a part of the final battle. Tribulation's voice sounded beside Li Tianlan. There are battles everywhere on the battlefield. This area in front of us is even a relatively small one. The heavy rain almost completely blocked Li Tianlan's sight. He couldn't tell how big this area was, but the vague figures were dozens of meters away from each other at the closest. The place of the final battle. In Changdao, every corner where the enemy could be seen was the place of the final battle. Rear, Li Tianlan opened his mouth. He just said 2 words, and then he fell silent. As expected, Tribulation smiled and said in a cold voice, "Rear, there is no rear. We only have a temporary station now. After all, this is the territory of Changdao. Here, we only have a way forward, not a back." Li Tianlan fell silent. He took a deep look at the battle in the dark. After a long time, he said softly, "Let's go. Forward." Tribulation said, "The station is 6 kilometers away. 6 kilometers ahead from here." Li Tianlan knew that place. It used to be the station of Jifeng Sword Training School, and it was the first place where he was exposed. Sunset Shadow, the top assassin of Sai City, died together with the Big Dipper, an expert of the half-step invincible realm of Jifeng Sword Training School. Li Tianlan went down the mountain in silence. The closer they got to the station, the faster they moved. The station of Jifeng Sword Training School was now occupied by Zhongzhou State, and the forest around the village was also cordoned off. Tribulation and Li Tianlan successfully entered the village after passing through 3 cordons. The people of Zhongzhou State were having a meeting at this time. They said they were having a meeting, but they were actually waiting for news. The news from Huading had reached Changdao half a day ago. Huading was in a mess now, but fortunately, it didn't suffer too much damage, because a large number of superiors imprisoned in Huading started to hide as soon as they got out, and then they tried to find a chance to return to East Island. East Island was their foundation. Now that their home was in complete chaos, they naturally had no time to avenge their imprisonment. Although the experts in Huading had also captured some people, more people had left Huading. The 5 invincible realm experts worked together to break out of the encirclement. Tianhai Wuji was slightly injured, Chaos, the commander of Knights Templars, was seriously injured, and Jiang Qianyan, the second master of the Jiang family of South America, was slightly injured. Although the injuries were different, the 5 experts had all broken out of the encirclement and were almost on their way back. Among the 5 great experts, Chaos of the Divine Temple, Huang Kong, the master of Fantasy World, and Jiang Qianyan, the second master of the Jiang family of South America, would definitely not come to East Island, especially Huang Kong and Chaos. Their foundations in Northern Europe and North America had long been destroyed by Situ Cangyue and Gu Qianchuan. What they needed to do most was to go back and stabilize the overall situation. But Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Cangquan, the 2 local grandmasters of East Island, would definitely come to Changdao as soon as possible. Shinichi Miyamoto, who was in charge of the battlefield, was also there. 3 invincible realm experts. There were also a large number of East Island special warfare masters who had escaped from Huading. Once they returned to East Island, the final battle of Changdao would be inevitable. The situation in Zhongzhou State was getting worse and worse. Buying time had become their only choice. Before the 2 grandmasters, Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Cangquan, returned to Changdao with a large number of experts, Zhongzhou State had to inflict heavy damage on the remaining forces of East Island first, and then have a chance to win in the next severe situation. So half a day ago, Tribulation made a move. Not only Tribulation. Azure Dragon Gong Sun Chi of Zhongzhou State, Firmament of the Wang family of Beihai, Gu Zhendong of Kunlun City, Mount Shu, Eastern Theater of Operations, Shadow Sting Troop, all the experts walked out of the battlefield almost at the same time. The order to completely detonate the final battle was conveyed to everyone in Zhongzhou State. That was what Tribulation learned before he left. But in just half a day, Tribulation brought Li Tianlan back. When they walked into the temporary meeting room of the village, almost all the experts came back. The meeting room of the village was a relatively large bungalow with simple decorations. When Li Tianlan and Tribulation walked in, there were still many people standing in the meeting room. The atmosphere in the meeting room was a little depressing and scary, and everyone looked extremely gloomy. Li Tianlan's return caused a small commotion, but it soon subsided completely. There were only a few people who were worried about Li Tianlan. Li Beitian, Ning Qiancheng, Du Hanin, and other young people were not there. Deep Dream was standing with Thunder God of the Dongqing clan and Bai Yuming, the first miss of the Bai family. Seeing Li Tianlan, the gloomy expressions of the three eased a little at the same time. They nodded to Li Tianlan but did not speak. The atmosphere was a little strange. "It's good that you're back." Gong Sun Chi, who was sitting in the main seat, looked at Li Tianlan, nodded, and said, "How are you feeling?" "I need to deal with the wound, rest for a while, and eat something," Li Tianlan said in a calm tone. Gong Sun Chi nodded. When he was about to speak, Tribulation's low and hoarse voice had spread all over the room. Tianlan has wiped out the No. 6 Theater of Operations of East Island alone. Most of the experts, including Yue Kong, a half-step invincible realm expert, have died. Boom! There was an uproar, and a wave of voices rose in the somewhat narrow meeting room. Although there were many theaters of operations in East Island, there were no more than 10. Li Tianlan wiped out the No. 6 Theater of Operations alone, which meant that he wiped out more than 1/10 of the forces of East Island at this time. What kind of achievement was this? This kind of achievement had vaguely surpassed the meaning of the 4 words, "Young Heavenly Son." "But what are you doing?" Tribulation's voice continued. Gong Sun Chi's face changed. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan, nodded, and said, "Awesome. It's just a fluke." Li Tianlan looked tired and shook his head. Gong Sun Chi waved his hand and arranged Bai Yuming to take Li Tianlan out to have a rest. When the two figures disappeared, he smiled bitterly, looked at Tribulation, and said helplessly, "The situation has changed." Tribulation simply said, to express his doubt. "All the people of East Island have retreated." Gong Sun Chi took a deep breath and said calmly, "To be exact, all the experts have retreated." A few hours ago, a large number of cannon fodder suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Most of them didn't even enter the 4 realms of martial arts. Only a few reached the chi-controlling realm and the ice-condensing realm. As for their experts, none of them could be found. Tribulation's eyes narrowed. Cannon fodder? Even if they are cannon fodder, they are elites. I guess these people are probably from some secret forces of East Island. Who knows what they are when they take off their uniforms? At least for now, they are cannon fodder to consume our strength. Gong Sun Chi said coldly, "We can't find any experts, so we can only temporarily withdraw all the combat capability above the thunder-shocking realm, leaving only our ordinary elites to deal with them. We are racing against time." Obviously, Shinichi Miyamoto has made up his mind to stall for time. Tribulation was silent. After a long time, he asked directly, "What's your plan?" "Cooperation." Gong Sun Chi said calmly, "This is the only way at present. Cooperation with the people of the 5 superpowers. 2 hours ago, I sent someone to contact the Heroes Club and the Polar Ground Alliance. When those people from East Island come back, we won't have a good time, and neither will they. So the best way now is to form a joint force. If we can cooperate, even if we can't win this final battle, we won't die." Tribulation raised his eyes and looked at the others in the conference room. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Who could have thought that Zhongzhou State, which had the upper hand in the beginning, would be forced into such a dangerous situation? What did they say? Tribulation asked. Still waiting for the news. Gong Sun Chi shook his head. But before he finished speaking, his face suddenly changed. The atmosphere in the conference room became slightly silent. Gong Sun Chi's eyes suddenly became cold. No need to wait. He took a deep breath and said softly, I have received the news from my team. An hour ago, the Polar Ground Alliance refused our request for cooperation, and King Bear even slaughtered a squadron of the Shadow Sting army. Before everyone could get angry, Gong Sun Chi continued, half an hour ago, the Heroes Club also attacked us. The Heroes Club also attacked us. The conference room fell into complete silence. The attitudes of the two superpowers were enough to explain too many problems. In just half a day, Zhongzhou State had gone from a dangerous situation to a desperate situation. Unconsciously. Chapter 242. Shinichi Miyamoto looked at the battlefield in front of him quietly. There were fights near the station of Zhongzhou State, and there were also sporadic fights around the headquarters of East Island. The general trend and the chaos intertwined. The battlefield of hundreds of kilometers in Changdao was like a quiet hell right now. Once there was a sound, it almost meant a fight. The quarrel behind him came from the huge and gorgeous tent. The voices were getting louder and louder, and the tone was getting sharper and sharper. The questions seemed to be directed at Shinichi Miyamoto, rude and presumptuous. Shinichi Miyamoto walked forward a little, leisurely enjoying the rainstorm in front of him. The distance between them was widened. The quarrel behind him suddenly quieted down. Shinichi Miyamoto lowered his head to look at the time on his watch and frowned. The quarrel behind him became clear for a moment, and then it became blurred again. The curtain of the huge and gorgeous tent in the center of the headquarters was lifted and then put down. A slim figure in red walked up to Shinichi Miyamoto with an angry look on her face. This was a young woman who looked to be only 25 or 26 years old. She was over 1.6 meters tall and looked very petite, but her face was extremely charming, seductive and wild. The woman wore a long red dress with a high slit. There was a strong wind in the night rain, which blew up the hem of her dress. A pair of white and slender legs were suddenly exposed in the air. In the messy rainstorm, the red figure stood behind Shinichi Miyamoto, and the whole night seemed to be more colorful and fragrant. Master, those people are too much. The woman looked at Shinichi Miyamoto, who was motionless, and said while biting her pink lips. She was extremely beautiful and charming. Even though she was angry at this moment, she gave off a delicate feeling that seemed to be both angry and resentful at the same time. Shinichi Miyamoto didn't say anything. The woman looked more and more aggrieved. She had a long red silk tied around her waist, which tightly wrapped around her slender waist. The two ends of the red silk hung down to her thighs. Two small folding fans were tied to the two ends of the red silk, swaying gently in the wind. The woman reached out and grabbed the folding fans along the red silk. With a swish, she opened the folding fans. The blades of the fans tore the curtain of rain apart violently, and a scorching heat wave rose in the cool rain. I really want to kill all those people. They are like mad dogs, biting people everywhere. Master, can I go in and kill them? The woman smiled sweetly, and a cold killing intent immediately burst out from her smile that could captivate one's soul. They are the ones who died. It's normal for them to be agitated. Shinichi Miyamoto looked back at his best disciple and said in a calm tone. Agitation and insult are two different things. Do they really think they can insult our special warfare area just because they are generals? What? They seem to be quarreling with High Priest Tianyue, but in fact, you are our master, they are you. The woman said hatefully, and her charming smile became even more resentful. Shinichi Miyamoto smiled and didn't say anything. He was the one who gave the order to East Island's current turtle-like tactic. If the superiors withdrew temporarily, it was necessary to send a large number of elites to fill in the gaps and even to consume the enemy's strength. Miyamoto, Enli. But the term, cannon fodder, was limited to this battlefield. After all, this was a dark collision between superpowers and countries. Zhongzhou State had more than 1,000 people in Changdao right now. It wasn't a lot, but each of them had at least entered the 4 realms of martial arts. How could ordinary Miyamoto hurt them? The so-called Miyamoto sent out were all the elite troops of the East Island Army. This was the home court of East Island. As long as the soldiers took off their uniforms and military ranks, who could say they were soldiers? Even if everyone knew it, no one would say they were breaking the rules. They had the home court advantage. If Shinichi Miyamoto said they were combatants of the special warfare system, then they were. In this way, Shinichi Miyamoto wouldn't face the pressure from the outside, but he would face the pressure from the inside. The East Island Miyamoto, cannon fodder wandering in the battlefield were actually the elites of the East Island Army, and they were temporarily integrated into the special warfare system. But Shinichi Miyamoto asked them to be Miyamoto, to consume the enemy's combat power. As soon as the decision was announced, Shinichi Miyamoto received strong protests from the military. Shinichi Miyamoto didn't care. He was the commander-in-chief of the battlefield, and his orders were absolute. As soon as the order was issued, nearly 6,000 Miyamoto cannon fodder were sent to the battlefield. They were simply the most expensive batch of Miyamoto cannon fodder. But Shinichi Miyamoto sent them out without hesitation to consume the power of Zhongzhou State, delay the attack of Zhongzhou State, and achieve the final victory. This method was understandable, but not everyone could accept it. Several generals of the military in Changdao came to the general headquarters as soon as possible. The cannon fodder sent by Shinichi Miyamoto were the elites of the military, and most of them were elites from some ace armies. And the generals who came to the general headquarters were also from the ace armies. They could be said to be the most powerful force in the military. Shinichi Miyamoto avoided meeting these people. He asked Tianyu, the high priest of Ise Grand Shrine, to handle everything, and asked his best disciple, Mai Shiranui, to participate in the discussion. As a result, not long after the meeting started, Mai Shiranui was mocked by several generals and almost lost her temper on the spot. After she left in anger, the meeting in the tent suddenly became more lively. That's expected. Shinichi Miyamoto was silent for a while, then shook his head and said calmly, "Watch the rain." Mai Shiranui opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she finally kept silent and watched the boring night rain with Shinichi Miyamoto. The quarrel in the back became louder and clearer in the night. A trace of distress and irritation flashed between Mai Shiranui's charming eyebrows. She suddenly asked, "Is it true?" Shinichi Miyamoto expressed his doubt. Mai Shiranui, who had been with Shinichi Miyamoto since she was a child, didn't have much awe for her master. She only had a kind of respect and concern from the bottom of her heart, as if he was her father's daughter. "I heard some rumors about you, master." In the heavy rain, Mai Shiranui whispered. Shinichi Miyamoto was indifferent. "And I saw the crown prince yesterday." He was a little annoying and frivolous. Shinichi Miyamoto turned around and took a deep look at Mai Shiranui. A cold light flashed in his eyes. "Master, your status in East Island is no less than that of Gu Xingyun in Zhongzhou State. You just used some cannon fodder, and it wasn't out of selfishness. Although those generals have great power, how could they have the guts to come here and criticize you?" Shinichi Miyamoto suddenly interrupted Mai Shiranui and said in a calm tone, "Someone has to be responsible for some things." Mai Shiranui's face suddenly changed, and she was a little panicked. She muttered to herself, "So, the rumors are true." In fact, there had been rumors for a long time. In the first few days of the Battle of Changdao, the situation in East Island was extremely grim, and people in all walks of life were in a panic. After the battle, the future of the special warfare system of East Island was temporarily unknown, but the economy suffered a fatal blow, which was irreparable. And now it seemed that even in the final battle, Shinichi Miyamoto didn't show a satisfactory attitude to the authorities of East Island and suffered heavy losses. Under such circumstances, how could there be no rumors? Recently, a lot of people said that East Island suffered such a huge loss because of Shinichi Miyamoto's hesitation at the beginning and his incompetence after arriving in Changdao. There seemed to be a force secretly trying to blame all the losses of East Island on Shinichi Miyamoto. Because of this, when Mai Shiranui met the Crown Prince yesterday, he made an almost blatant hint. Because of this, the military generals who usually wouldn't be taken seriously by Shinichi Miyamoto dared to come and question him. "Master, what's the attitude of the royals?" Mai Shiranui suddenly asked. "The result hasn't come out yet. What attitude can the royals have?" Shinichi Miyamoto shook his head. Mai Shiranui didn't believe it. At this time, the royals' lack of attitude was actually a kind of implicit support. But if they really supported him, why would the Crown Prince say those words to him yesterday? The Crown Prince, Mai Shiranui wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Shinichi Miyamoto smiled and said calmly, "In this kind of thing, he's not important enough. Don't worry, it'll be fine." Shinichi Miyamoto glanced at Mai Shiranui and said slowly, "At most, he will give up the leadership of the Divine Wind Force." He said it casually. But Mai Shiranui clearly saw a touch of darkness deep in his eyes. "Is there no other way?" Mai Shiranui asked softly. Shinichi Miyamoto's lips moved. When he was about to speak, two figures hurried through the night rain and quickly came to Shinichi Miyamoto. The two imperial guards around the Mikado. Glacier. Tide. Shinichi Miyamoto glanced at them and said softly, "Is there any news?" "Yes." Glacier nodded seriously. His eyes were shining with unspeakable excitement. "His Highness Tianhai Wuji has just got in touch with the royals. It is expected that he will come to Changdao in 15 hours. The bright light flashed in Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes, but he remained calm and set his eyes on Tide. "What did they say?" Shinichi Miyamoto asked. They he mentioned, of course, didn't refer to the people of East Island, but the dark superpowers that were still entrenched in Changdao. Zhongzhou State, which had the upper hand, was in danger. In just a dozen hours, the power of East Island would change dramatically and completely overwhelm Zhongzhou State. At this time, the attitude of the other dark forces would become extremely important. Under such circumstances, Zhongzhou State would send people to talk about cooperation with the dark forces. East Island would naturally send people to test their attitude. The five superpowers cooperated and competed with each other. Under such circumstances, what choice would they make? Withdraw from Changdao? Attack East Island with Zhongzhou State? Plot against Zhongzhou State with East Island? All seemed possible. Shinichi Miyamoto hoped that he could get a third attitude. The five dark forces conspired with East Island to plot against Zhongzhou State. In this way, the crisis of East Island would be completely resolved. Even after the war, he could deal with his negligence more easily. East Island was about to receive great support. At this time, it was possible to persuade the five dark forces to deal with Zhongzhou State together. The most important thing was what price Shinichi Miyamoto or East Island could pay. They agreed to do it. Tide said softly, "More than an hour ago, the Polar Ground Alliance and the Heroes Club even killed a small part of the elites of Zhongzhou State to show their sincerity. It's just that they seem to be asking for too much. What do they want?" Shinichi Miyamoto's tone was gentle, but his eyes were shining brighter and brighter. "The Jiang family of South America wants Li Tianlan. They only want Li Tianlan." Tide thought for a while and said. Shinichi Miyamoto listened calmly. Tide continued, "Knights Templars want to establish East Asia Diocese. This should be the will of the Vatican. The Polar Ground Alliance. King Bear didn't put forward any conditions. He just said he was willing to help. Fantasy World and the Heroes Club have the same conditions. They Tide glanced at Shinichi Miyamoto and seemed to hesitate. Say it. Shinichi Miyamoto said calmly. Tide gritted his teeth and didn't look at Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes. He turned his head and said quickly, these two forces want Lyohua Palace. Lyohua Palace. Different from the Divine Wind Force, this was Shinichi Miyamoto's own foundation. A foundation that only belonged to him. Shinichi Miyamoto didn't get angry. His eyes lit up again, and he raised the corner of his mouth with an enigmatic smile. Mai Shiranui looked angry. When she was about to say something, Shinichi Miyamoto waved his hand and said firmly, if they want it, then give it to them. We can't wait anymore. Pass the order, everyone take the initiative to attack Zhongzhou at all costs. He looked at Mai Shiranui, the glacier, and Tide. Chapter 243. Like the last time, Li Tianlan woke up after sleeping for less than 3 hours. He was really sober. As soon as he opened his eyes, his fatigue and sleepiness disappeared completely. The light in the room was on. The soft light shone on the mottled walls, and the shabby furniture was faintly visible. It was still a long night outside the window. The rain was hazy, and the darkness and humidity filled every corner of Changdao. Li Tianlan was stunned for a while, then he slowly sat up and pulled out the infusion bottle in his hand. The pain in his body was still there. Those gunshot wounds and knife wounds of different depths were entangled with the drugs, stimulating his nerves. It hurt a lot. But it was comfortable. For Li Tianlan, it was comfortable not to be hungry or tired. After breaking through the limit, his willpower kept him sober and rational from beginning to end. In this state, Li Tianlan couldn't even faint. He was like the most perfect fighting machine. With a strong willpower that could break gold and crack stones, he only lacked physical strength. As long as he recovered a little, he would be able to break out the most powerful combat capability. But his injuries were getting worse. He could still fight, but no one was optimistic about the consequences if he continued. Even a machine could be completely damaged after overloading, let alone a human being. Li Tianlan stood up, looking calm. At least for now, on this battlefield where there was no rear, he was not qualified to think about other things. On the battlefield, to live was to kill the enemy, and to close his eyes was equal to death. As for the future, there was no rear on the battlefield, so there was no future. Outside the window, the night was dark and thick. Time passed slowly and steadily in the heavy rain. Li Tianlan looked out of the window. The 7th day was approaching. One more day, if everything went well, they should be on their way back to Zhongzhou State at this time tomorrow. But whether it went well or not, how many of them, the elites from Zhongzhou State, could go back? Li Tianlan turned and walked out of the door. The moment the door was opened, a slim figure put her hand on the doorknob, as if she wanted to come in. Li Tianlan's hand pulled the door inward, and the person outside the door pushed the door inward. Both sides were caught off guard. A soft and fragrant figure fell directly into Li Tianlan's arms, and her hand subconsciously hugged his waist. Li Tianlan's eyes turned cold for a moment. He almost instinctively wanted to take action, but he relaxed when he saw who it was. Sister Bai. He looked at Bai Yuming, who seemed to have not reacted yet, and took the initiative to greet her. Bai Yuming was obviously absent-minded. After a few seconds, she responded, "Ah, you're awake. How do you feel?" "Not bad." Li Tianlan was a little embarrassed because Bai Yuming had been in his arms and didn't want to leave until now. He changed the topic stiffly. "How is it outside?" "Not so good. I should say very bad." Bai Yuming shook her head and naturally stood up straight. She pinched Li Tianlan's arm and said with a smile, "Not bad. Although the injury is a little serious, your body is very strong." Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When he was about to say something, Bai Yuming had thrown the bag in her hand into his arms. "Put it on. Samsara sent it here 2 days ago and said it was for you." It's a good thing. In the current situation, safety comes first. Li Tianlan took the bag and felt that it was unexpectedly heavy, at least 7 or 8 kilograms. There was a white coat in the bag. The white shirt was slim-fitting and very long. Even though it was summer, it could already be considered a long trench coat. However, the clothes felt extremely cold to the touch, so it shouldn't feel hot when worn on the body. However, wearing such clothes on a summer day, Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, and he didn't know what to say for a while. This is cloud silk. Even in the dark world, it's a rare thing. It's warm in winter and cool in summer, and impervious to fire and water. Is it also impervious to swords and guns? Li Tianlan interrupted Bai Yuming with a bitter smile. More than that. Bai Yuming rolled her eyes at him. This thing can also absorb power. Few people under the thunder-shocking realm can break the defense of cloud silk. Even if I do it myself, the power transmitted to you through cloud silk will be weakened a lot. Cloud silk is the highest-end material in the dark world, second only to murderous weapons. At present, only Zhongzhou State, Star State, and Snow Country can master this technology. Such a coat is all made of cloud silk. Not to mention whether Samsara's technology is up to standard, just for these cloud silk, I don't know how much blood they will shed. This kind of thing is likely to cause a battle between superiors of the invincible realm. She reached out her hand and flicked on the coat. There seemed to be wind and thunder in the air. Bai Yoming's slender fingertips flicked on the coat, but the pure white and soft fabric clearly made the sound of gold and iron, and even some sparks splashed. There are few of these things in Zhongzhou State. It's not that they can't make them, but it's a complete waste to use cloud silk to make clothes. If it wasn't for the fact that you're my younger brother, I might have kept these clothes for myself without telling you and Samsara. If I can take it back to the Bai family afterward, it can be regarded as the most precious treasure of the family. Bai Yoming's eyes were a little hot and envious. She suddenly tilted her head and said with a smile, "What's the matter with you and Qin Weibai? You haven't known each other for long, but that woman seems to be willing to give you everything without complaint or regret. Did she owe you in her previous life?" Li Tianlan laughed at himself, put on the coat, and didn't speak. The white coat was very close to his body, and on him, there was a kind of pure and slender charm. The feeling of the coat sticking to his body through the inner lining was cool and soft, with a trace of warmth, just like the body temperature of Qin Weibai when he held her in his arms. Unfortunately, it didn't have that natural and rich fragrance. Li Tianlan suddenly remembered that he hadn't smelled Qin Weibai's scent for a long time. He missed her very much. Li Tianlan gently touched the white coat on his body and said to himself, "I haven't seen her for a long time. If this retreat goes well, you should be able to see her in Huading at this time tomorrow." Bai Yuming said with a smile, and the seriousness in her eyes became clearer and clearer. Li Tianlan suddenly raised his head and looked at Bai Yuming. "Retreat? We can only retreat." Bai Yoming's tone was calm but a little unwilling. Li Tianlan didn't speak. He looked at Bai Yuming quietly, waiting for her explanation. Zhongzhou State was plotting against East Island. The momentum was so powerful that it shocked the whole dark world. From Huading to East Island, to Northern Europe, and then to North America, layers upon layers of arrangements, great efforts, and countless sacrifices were made. At this time, when there was no result, they actually wanted to retreat? Who could be willing? Most of the elites of East Island trapped in Huading have broken out successfully. Bai Yuming said blandly, "Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Tsangxuan, the two grandmasters of the invincible realm, will probably arrive in Changdao tomorrow, and they will be followed by a large number of masters of the special warfare system of East Island. Tianlan, we can't do this." What could they do even if they were unwilling? The general trend was like this: who could do anything? We can race against time with East Island. Li Tianlan felt aggrieved. For Zhongzhou State, he might not have a clear sense of belonging, but for the first time since he entered the secular world, he did one thing with all his heart. Fighting, fleeing, and risking his life. All of this, at the most critical moment, he actually had to retreat. This kind of grievance really made him angry. There's no time. If we delay, we'll die. Bai Yuming shook her head and said in a cold tone, the Heroes Club and the Polar Ground Alliance have already started to attack us. For the time being, we can't be sure whether they have reached an agreement with East Island or not, but the two invincible realm masters of East Island are about to return. If they can't get East Island, they will cooperate with East Island to suppress Zhongzhou State. This is very likely. But we can't afford such a loss, so we can only retreat. The Polar Ground Alliance and the Heroes Club's attack was probably a precursor. Before things were clear, the 5 superpowers in the Dark World had always taken an attitude of cooperation. Since the 2 superpowers attacked Zhongzhou State first, the other 3 superpowers would definitely show their attitudes. East Island and the 5 superpowers joined hands to attack Zhongzhou State. For the elites of Zhongzhou State in Changdao, this was completely a hopeless situation. Can we retreat? Li Tianlan quickly calmed down. He was silent for a while and suddenly asked. We need to sacrifice. You, Wang Xingxiao, and Gu Hanshan must go. The most elite and the youngest force, including me, must retreat as soon as possible. The others. Bai Yuming said dryly, but she didn't finish her words. She didn't need to finish her words. The others were naturally cannon fodder. But such cannon fodder was not those with weak strength, but those with the strongest strength, including several masters of the half-step invincible realm. Without enough strength, how could they cover their retreat? All the sacrifices are worth it. As if she was hypnotizing herself, Bai Yuming said, it's much better than being annihilated. Not to mention the others, just Li Tianlan and Gu Hanshan. If Wang Xingxiao and the other 2 died here, Zhongzhou State would lose 3 invincible realm masters in the next few decades. Such a loss was enough to damage Zhongzhou State's right to speak in the Dark World to the greatest extent. So other people could be sacrificed, but these 3 young heavenly sons must be kept at all costs. No one knew how many people could retreat successfully this time. But as long as Li Tianlan and the other 2 could leave, Zhongzhou State would not be completely defeated. But even if the 3 of them could leave, what Zhongzhou State would face next would be the heaviest loss in recent decades or even hundreds of years. If this plan failed, Zhongzhou State's power in the Dark World would greatly regress. But now the decision to retreat had been made, which was enough to show that Zhongzhou State was ready to face this consequence. Is there no other way? Li Tianlan looked at Bai Yuming and asked. Dressed in white, he stood straight in front of Bai Yuming. His whole body was filled with a kind of heart-palpitating sharpness. East Island has no other way but to find a way to make up for the loss in other places. Bai Yuming shook her head. Other places? Where? Li Tianlan's tone was sharp. A cold light flashed in Bai Yuming's eyes, and she said word by word, Annan State. In any case, the rebellion in Annan State could be said to be the beginning of Zhongzhou State from an advantage to a disadvantage. If Zhongzhou State wanted to make up for it, it could only start from Annan State. I can still fight. Li Tianlan's tone was low and determined. Bai Yuming took a deep breath and sighed. It's the general trend. Tianlan, you'd better go with the flow. It's the most important thing for Zhongzhou State that the 3 of you are alive. A phone suddenly rang. Bai Yuming took out her mobile phone and looked at it. It was a strange number. Surprised, she answered the phone and said, Hello. Well, it's me. Yes, Tianlan is here. You are? Oh. She spoke quickly and finally handed the phone to Li Tianlan. She said with a strange look in her eyes, Military Counselor of Samsara can't contact you, so he came to me. He should also advise you to leave. Li Tianlan frowned, took the phone, and said directly, I'm Li Tianlan. The phone was filled with the sound of violent rain. The rain hit the woods and made a pitter-patter. Li Tianlan suddenly had a feeling of palpitation in his heart again. It was like the palpitation and panic when he suddenly woke up on the back of Tribulation, as if he had lost the most important thing. On the phone, military counselor's voice finally sounded, hoarse and tired. "Young Master Li, the boss is missing in Changdao." Li Tianlan's brain buzzed, and the whole brain became blank for a moment. In the night sky outside the window, a large piece of flashing thunder suddenly lit up the sky. In Li Tianlan's deathly silence, a thunderclap that seemed to split the whole Changdao suddenly swept across the night rain. The thunder suppressed everything. The dim light in the room suddenly went out in the thunder. In the darkness, Bai Yuming subconsciously called Tianlan softly. There was no response. Bai Yuming's face changed. When she waved her hand, a piece of blue light lit up. Under the faint electric light, Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared. Bai Yuming, whose face changed dramatically, rushed out of the room as fast as she could. It was still raining heavily outside the room. The aftermath of the thunder shook the sky. The sky seemed to be covered with white. In the increasingly heavy rain, the late night of the 6th day was passing. Dawn was about to break in the sky. Chapter 244. Chilly wind. Cold rain. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. On the last day of the final battle, Changdao looked particularly manic and depressing at dawn. The boundless rain splashed in the high sky. In the raging wind and rain, the whole world seemed to become twisted and crazy in the darkness. A fierce white shadow crossed the temporary station of Zhongzhou State when the wind and rain were the most violent, and rushed out of the village. The heavy rain and cold wind were blowing in the air at the same time. At the moment when everyone was discussing how to retreat, everyone in the entire station of Zhongzhou State clearly felt the strong and almost suffocating killing intent. The white shadow crossed the sky, like a white rainbow crossing the night curtain in the heavy rain. Wherever the white shadow passed, the wind and rain all over the sky broke and dissipated. The air was vibrating, and the extremely fierce killing intent kept condensing. In a very short time, it reached the peak state that shocked most people. The retreating wind. The broken rain. The white shadow passed through the wind and rain. When it was about to rush out of the village, a black shadow suddenly began to condense in front of the white shadow. The sharp and arrogant sword intent almost unscrupulously swept through every corner of the space. Where the white shadow stood, the wind and rain retreated, but only this black shadow was condensing quickly and quietly, becoming clearer and clearer. The white shadow stopped on the way forward. The next moment, Tribulation and the black shadow changed positions and stood in front of the white shadow. The silver mask covered Tribulation's face. The Lord of Shadow in the dark world seemed to always be calm and cold, neither sad nor happy, neither arrogant nor rash. The heavy rain covered the old and shabby village below, and the mountains and forests not far away became blurred in the rain. The white sky began to fill the night. The light gradually brightened, but the place where the two stood gradually became blurred. "Where are we going?" Tribulation asked. Li Tianlan stopped. Dressed in pure white, he was hovering in the air at this time, with an indescribable style. Fierce, peaceful, determined, and proud. Looking at Tribulation in front of him, Li Tianlan bowed deeply, almost lowering his head to the ground. Above the sky, the greatest respect was nothing more than this. "Greetings, martial uncle." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Tribulation's pupils contracted fiercely, and he didn't speak. He had not been in contact with Li Tianlan for a long time, but he thought he had some understanding of this martial nephew. Li Tianlan had never been so polite to him. Wasn't this kind of politeness and respect also another kind of resolution that didn't care about anything? "Where to?" After a moment of silence, he asked again. "Xiao Bai is missing." "I'll find her." Li Tianlan said lightly. "No." The silver mask covered Tribulation's expression. His eyes flickered slightly, and then he said resolutely, "We're already making a retreat plan. You're on the first list to retreat. Go back." If there are any clues, I'll bring Chief Qin back for you. Li Tianlan shook his head and said in a flat but unquestionable tone, I have to go. It was raining cats and dogs. It was like a splash of water falling from the sky. All of a sudden, Li Tianlan's killing intent completely disappeared. Under the vast night sky, sword intent overflowed and countless raindrops fell rapidly. Dense sword chi whistled in every drop of rain. The raindrops became cold and sharp, and a gust of cold sword intent emanated from the rainwater without warning. You want to fight me? Tribulation's voice suddenly rose a little. His tone was still hoarse and gloomy, but his low tone spread through the night rain and instantly spread through half of the village. Everyone came out of their rooms and looked up at the two men who seemed to be confronting each other in the air. The young governor of Sai City. The deputy governor of Sai City. What were they going to do at this time? Li Tianlan looked at Tribulation quietly. He still didn't look angry, but there was a hint of complicated emotions in his eyes. He bowed deeply again and said calmly, I don't want to. He said he didn't want to, but at the moment when they looked at each other, Tribulation saw determination in Li Tianlan's eyes. And only determination. Tribulation suddenly felt powerless. Qin Weibai actually came to Changdao. This wasn't part of the plan. What was more unexpected was that she disappeared in Changdao. In such a complicated situation, with Qin Weibai's importance, anyone who found Qin Weibai, who didn't know martial arts, would not let her go easily. It was a normal choice to take her away. Tribulation didn't not know this news. In fact, he knew it earlier than Li Tianlan. But now, not to mention that the cooperation between Samsara and Zhongzhou state seemed to be united, even if the two sides were still close, in such a dangerous situation, Zhongzhou state could only take care of itself first. Military counselor didn't wait for a clear response and support from Zhongzhou state, so he informed Li Tianlan. This was also understandable. Li Tianlan would definitely take action when he got the news. But if he took action, Tribulation wouldn't be the only one who had a headache. Tribulation thought for a while. He was not good at talking, and persuading people was not what he was good at. He slowly opened his mouth and said word by word, in this situation, even if you get out of the way. Li Tianlan said directly before he finished. Qin Weibai's whereabouts were unknown, and he couldn't waste time. He couldn't afford to waste a second. He took a step forward. At this moment, Li Tianlan was high in the sky, but his whole body seemed to shine like a bright moon. I have to go, he said firmly. What can you do if you go? Where can you go now? The 5 dark forces and East Island are all suspected of taking Qin Weibai away. Are you going to check them one by one? Even if you go, can you bring her back? Tribulation's voice suddenly became extremely cold. Li Tianlan didn't stop at all and went straight forward. I can, he said softly in a casual tone, but behind this casual tone, there was almost desperate madness and confidence. He moved forward slowly. At this moment, everyone knew that as long as Tribulation didn't give way, this battle was doomed to be inevitable. Li Tianlan didn't want to take action, but it didn't mean he couldn't. He had to go. He had to go to the place where Qin Weibai disappeared at the beginning, meet with military counselor first, and then search for her bit by bit. In any case, he had to bring Qin Weibai back. Li Tianlan's expression grew calmer, but there were 2 balls of blazing fire in his eyes, with persistence and coldness that could burn him into ashes. At this moment, Li Tianlan didn't think about the Li family or the future. His mind was full of Qin Weibai. It was not her unparalleled beauty that could cause the downfall of countries and cities, nor was it her gentleness and strength in front of others. The two of them had never said sweet words or made vows of undying love. At this moment, what Li Tianlan recalled the most was Qin Weibai's every move and look when they were together. Those details that he had never cared about emerged bit by bit. Her eyes were as clear as water and as gentle as clouds. Whether it was charming or enchanting, whether it was cold or blurred, when that pair of eyes that were as bright as the Milky Way faced him, they always carried a kind of deep affection that was engraved into the bones, engraved into the depths of the soul. Li Tianlan chuckled. At the moment when he was about to pass by tribulation, he solemnly told himself that he would never let her down even if he was smashed to pieces and doomed eternally. Tribulation stepped aside. Li Tianlan walked into the wind and rain. Without hesitation. Have you ever thought about the consequences? Tribulation's voice came from behind. Outside the village, everyone is an enemy. Only you, only yourself. So what? If you don't come back, you don't come back. Ha! Tribulation was so angry that he laughed and said in a deep voice, "What will happen to the Li family in the future?" Li Tianlan's figure was about to disappear. His voice came from the front and was clear. The existence of the Li family is to protect what we want to protect and what we deserve to protect. If I can't even protect my own woman, what's the point of the so-called Li family no matter how glorious it is? What does it have to do with me? He landed on the ground. He walked out of the village and into the mountain forest. The sky gradually lit up with white light. The wind and rain were dark. Tribulation stood where he was, looking at the blurred distance. All of a sudden, the soaring sword intent brought with it a blazing flame and shot up into the sky with a loud bang. The sword intent tore the sky, and the fire spread wildly. In an instant, the raging fire covered the mountain forest in the heavy rain. The flame surged and rose against the trend. The fire rushed into the rain curtain like a torrent, illuminating the morning sky. Countless raindrops were flowing with flames, covering the mountain forest. The sky was raining fire. In response to the fire rain, there was a large expanse of ghastly and dazzling lightning. A large expanse of lightning spread and danced in the air, from high altitude to the ground. At the moment when the fire and lightning intertwined, a huge shock wave accompanied by a loud roar sounded in the mountain forest. There was a loud bang. Countless trees collapsed and burst into pieces. Li Tianlan's advancing figure retreated at a faster speed, or rather, flew back. Boom! His figure completely lost control and crashed into the village, crashing into a bungalow at the entrance of the village. The bungalow completely collapsed, and the dust was flying. Li Tianlan's figure directly sank into a large pile of stone bricks. Tribulation's expression was solemn. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the mountain forest. Gongsun Qi, Firmament, and Gu Zhendong immediately appeared beside Tribulation. Before anyone could speak, there was a large number of footsteps in the mountain forest. The sonorous footsteps were deafening like thunder in the night rain. Boundless figures all over the mountains appeared from all directions of the mountain forest, like a crowd in the night rain. The black tide of people pushed forward, completely surrounding the village that was already endless. Silently, a figure seemed to step out of the void and stopped in front of Tribulation. Shinichi Miyamoto, who was wearing a black scarf and wearing a tight ninja costume, stood quietly in the void with a dagger in his hand. His soft voice, which sounded like he was murmuring to himself, resounded through the sky. No one can leave here today except the dead. Tribulation was silent and didn't say a word. In the crowd, he saw a lot of familiar figures. In the dense crowd, most of them were the cannon fodder of East Island. But those superiors hiding in the cannon fodder were still dazzling. He saw Tianyu, the high priest of Ise Grand Shrine. He saw Tide of the Glacier. He saw Ban of the Heroes Club. He saw King Bear of the Polar Ground Alliance. He also saw Shing of Knights Templars and Crow of Fantasy World. Before Zhongzhou State's retreat plan was officially implemented, all the forces of East Island had joined hands to attack in the shortest time. In the morning, the soldiers were at the gate of the city. It was solemn in the village. In addition to the solemnity in everyone's heart, there was only some panic that they didn't want to admit. Until a chaotic sound rang out. In the ruins at the entrance of the village, countless bricks and stones flew up in a loud noise. The wind and rain were fierce. Li Tianlan, who was dressed in white without a speck of dust, walked out of the ruins. He didn't gather with anyone from Zhongzhou state. He just walked up to the sky and walked forward alone. In the crowd, Dongqing Rushi silently watched the figure walking higher and higher in the sky, and her face was in a trance. One of her eyes became more and more blank and innocent, while the other clear and beautiful pupil was full of a complicated look and even a little intoxicated. In the farthest part of the crowd, in the void far away from East Island and Zhongzhou state, the air was slightly twisted. A slim white figure with a long sword on her back and a red dagger on her waist stared blankly at Li Tianlan, who was climbing up to the sky. In such a long distance, under the heavy rain, the young white figure in her sight was already blurred, but she clearly saw the familiar pride. That was the arrogant will that dared to despise heaven and earth. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Tianlan finally walked up to the sky, to the highest place. The silver human emperor stretched out in his hand and turned into the ultimate form of sky halberd. Two scarlet spear blades stretched out, elegant and complicated. Li Tianlan stood in the highest position, holding the human emperor and looking around. The crowd in his sight was still surging, as if it had filled the whole world. They were all enemies. Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were cold. In the silence, he spoke first, and his tone was calm. My name is Li Tianlan. As he spoke, he stared directly at the most powerful expert of the invincible realm, Shinichi Miyamoto. Qin Weibai is my woman. 2 hours ago, she disappeared near the No. 6 theater of operations. Li Tianlan paused and looked at Shinichi Miyamoto. Chapter 245. Invincible realm experts should be respected even if they were enemies. Shinichi Miyamoto was in the invincible realm. So at this moment, Li Tianlan's every move was extremely arrogant in everyone's eyes. The crowd was in an uproar. Whether inside or outside the village. Because of Li Tianlan's attitude and what he said. Qin Weibai was missing. Different from the rising stars in the dark world like Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao, and Gu Hanshan, Qin Weibai, who didn't know martial arts, was definitely a big shot in the dark world. She was the second most powerful person in Samsara Palace. If something really happened to her in East Island, even if East Island won this war, it would have to face a very serious follow-up situation. The master of Samsara Palace could break a murderous weapon with one sword strike. If she took the murderous weapon Blue Sky Underworld to conquer East Island for Qin Weibai, it would definitely bring suffocating pressure to East Island. Everyone subconsciously looked at Shinichi Miyamoto's expression. Shinichi Miyamoto was expressionless. Only he could be sure that East Island didn't do Qin Weibai's disappearance. Besides East Island, there were only 5 dark superpowers. Which one was it? The first goal of the 5 superpowers when they entered Changdao was definitely East Island. But this goal became impossible after the turmoil in Huading. They had no choice but to change their plans. Now the 5 superpowers joined hands with East Island, and each of them made a request. They wanted Fantasy World and Heroes Club of Liuhua Palace of Shinichi Miyamoto. They wanted Li Tianlan's Jiang family of South America. The Polar Ground Alliance, which didn't make a clear request but actually had the biggest plot. They wanted to build a real Knights Templar of the East Asian Diocese. None of them seemed suspicious, but they were all suspicious. Maybe Qin Weibai's disappearance was a plot made by the 5 superpowers again. If this thing was done well, it was very likely to be a fatal foreshadowing of the general trend. The more Shinichi Miyamoto thought about it, the more likely it seemed. What the 5 superpowers wanted most was the special warfare system of East Island. They joined hands to plan the border war outside of Zhongzhou state. Their purpose was to make Zhongzhou state unable to support Changdao when it lost a lot of blood. To put it bluntly, they hoped that Zhongzhou state's action in East Island would fail. The Blood Battalion was the top priority of the Border Control Corps. It was impossible for Zhongzhou state to sit back and do nothing. They invited Arcis, who ranked second on the divine list and lived in the headquarters of the Vatican, and asked him to go east with the murderous weapon Aria of Death. In this way, Zhongzhou state was bound to react. Wang Tianzong's trip to the border also proved this point. When Wang Tianzong took action, Huading was relatively empty. Zhongzhou state could only use the third batch of manpower that was going to support Changdao to guard Huading. And the strength of Zhongzhou state elites in Changdao would be weakened after losing the third batch of support. Everything was going according to their plan. But the only thing that deviated from the plan was the change in Huading. It was obviously out of the plan to let the 5 invincible realm experts get out of trouble. Because even if Wang Tianzong left Huading, Huading still had Gu Xingyun, the master of Samsara Palace, and the third batch of elites who were supposed to enter Changdao. This was the power that could suppress the 5 invincible realm experts. But the 5 superpowers didn't expect that the master of Samsara Palace didn't make a move at all. They planned the border war, but it didn't weaken the strength of Zhongzhou state much. Instead, it let countless elites trapped in Huading see the opportunity. So the chaos got more chaotic and completely out of their control. So that Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Cangquan, the 2 grandmasters of the invincible realm, set foot on the road to return in advance. The 5 superpowers had no choice but to cooperate with East Island. They would attack Zhongzhou state together before the other 2 invincible realm experts of East Island returned, so that they could get some small rewards. They definitely wouldn't be reconciled to such a situation. Qin Weibai's disappearance might have something to do with this kind of unwillingness. If this was the foreshadowing of the 5 superpowers, then East Island would definitely be blamed for Qin Weibai's disappearance. When the master of Samsara Palace attacked East Island in extreme anger, the 5 superpowers would come back again. And at that time, Zhongzhou state, which had already failed, would lose the qualification to compete with them. Would the truth be like this? Shinichi Miyamoto thought silently, but the result was not optimistic. Because he knew very well that no matter what the truth was, the mysterious force that controlled Qin Weibai would realize it sooner or later when Zhongzhou state's failure was a foregone conclusion. Even if this wasn't their plan, as long as they had Qin Weibai as their bargaining chip, his speculation could become a reality at any time. East Island seemed to be destined to be turbulent this year. Shinichi Miyamoto raised his head. He suddenly felt a little lucky. Lucky that the Heroes Club and Fantasy World wanted a bargaining chip. They wanted Liuhua Palace. Lucky that they wanted Liuhua Palace. As his thoughts flashed in a mess, in Shinichi Miyamoto's sight, the young man standing above him took a step forward again. His tone was still calm, so calm that it made people's hearts palpitate. Who took my woman away? Shinichi Miyamoto finally spoke. His voice was calm and majestic, rumbling between heaven and earth. Rude. Invincible realm experts should be respected even if they were enemies. Li Tianlan still moved forward. His eyes became bright and dazzling because of absolute focus. He looked into Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes. They looked at each other. The heavy rain fell, and the strong wind blew his white clothes. His figure stood at the highest place, so lonely, but so dazzling. It was a very magnificent feeling. He stood there, and it was impossible to ignore him. This is not a war. Li Tianlan looked at Shinichi Miyamoto and suddenly spoke in a soft voice. Only a few people understood what he meant. There was no right or wrong in a war, only positions. The relationship between enemies, allies, and allies had always been delicate, and it changed in an instant. If it was not a war, then it was hatred. Hatred could naturally give up all respect and awe. Qin Weibai disappeared in East Island, so East Island was naturally the biggest suspect and the most promising force to find Qin Weibai. So although Li Tianlan didn't know who took Qin Weibai, the first person he asked was Shinichi Miyamoto, who had the highest position in the special warfare system of East Island. If East Island couldn't give him an explanation, no matter what the master of Samsara Palace would do in the future, at least Li Tianlan dared to take revenge on East Island at all costs. Because this was not a war. Shinichi Miyamoto twitched the corner of his mouth. He was a little scared, but more disdainful. Is this a threat? He asked. His gentle voice echoed between heaven and earth, and the realm of the invincible realm was completely revealed. You can think so. Li Tianlan's tone was calm, but his words were unreasonable. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded, and his voice echoed between heaven and earth. In my opinion, this is a war. You can think otherwise, but it doesn't matter. Today, you and everyone in Zhongzhou State will die. He finally moved his eyes away from Li Tianlan and looked at the village in the morning light. In the village, all the elites of Zhongzhou State gathered in the shortest time possible, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Shinichi Miyamoto raised the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were cruel and cold. Li Tianlan also moved his eyes away and looked at all the enemies present. Where is she? He asked softly. No one spoke. So Li Tianlan started to move forward. To him, he had been losing all his life and had never had anything. He had the Li family. But what was the Li family? It was glorious, but it was also illusory. He had it, but he never had it. Qin Weibai was different. She was his woman. She had appeared in his life in the most real, warm, and bright way. The most real was everything. He didn't mind the retreat of Zhongzhou State. But from the moment he received the call from military counselor, he had no way out. At least, he couldn't see a way out. He couldn't see it. He wouldn't see it. He slowly clenched the sky halberd in his hand and lifted it up little by little. It was raining heavily. The enemy was like a tide. The darkness on the horizon completely dissipated. Di Jiang's figure appeared in Shangguan. The morning was hazy, and it was also raining in the southeast of Shangguan. The heavy rain fell in the mountainous area in the southeast of Shangguan, shrouding the mountains. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking over, there was a blurred fog everywhere, distant and indifferent, without any smoke. Di Jiang stood on the top of a low mountain and looked for a while. He shook his head and muttered to himself, what a good place. If I come again next time, I can come here to reminisce. He smiled and turned to walk down the hill. The mountainous area was undulating. Di Jiang walked for about 4 or 5 kilometers and finally saw a cave in the distance. The sky was completely bright. Di Jiang looked at his watch, put his hand in his mouth, and suddenly blew a sharp whistle. The ear-piercing whistle suddenly broke through the sky, bringing a series of harsh echoes in the whole mountainous area. As if responding to the whistle, the first figure appeared in the cave. Then the second one. More and more figures appeared. A squad, a squadron, a battalion. 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, a total of 300 figures walked out of the cave. Everyone walked steadily and looked calm. They walked out of the cave, walked up the hill, and stepped on the grass. The 300 people walked all the way. There was no rain between heaven and earth. All the rain completely disappeared where the 300 people passed. They walked quietly, as if they had completely defeated the will of heaven and earth. Di Jiang raised his eyebrows with a smile and inadvertently looked to the southeast. Shangguan was connected to Changdao. The southeast of Shangguan was the southwest of Changdao. And the southwest of Changdao was the battlefield. Be ready to go at any time. Di Jiang said in a flat tone. Yes. In the team of 300 people, a middle-aged man standing in the front responded in a deep voice. He clenched his fists subconsciously, and a dazzling blue light flashed. The hot breath filled the whole hill in the heavy rain. The heavy rain was receding. Di Jiang looked up at the sky with a smile, but his eyes were extremely cold. Heaven and earth? What was heaven and earth? What he was leading now was the only organized super force of the Wang family of Beihai. Code name, Heaven Punishment. This is not a war. When this peaceful voice rang in the living room through the screen, Qin Weibai was eating breakfast. The place where she was put under house arrest was very shabby, but the breakfast was very sumptuous. As a captive with great value, and even one of the future hostesses of the Jiang family of South America, Qin Weibai got enough preferential treatment. Wasn't Evil's playful, second sister-in-law, another kind of politeness? Even Moonlight, the superior of the half-step invincible realm of the Jiang family of South America, didn't dare to slight Qin Weibai in action, although there was hostility in her eyes. Qin Weibai was watching TV. The picture on the TV was the encirclement of Zhongzhou State. It seemed to know what Qin Weibai was paying attention to, so most of the time the picture was fixed on Li Tianlan. He ended the short conversation with Shinichi Miyamoto and looked at the crowd. Where is she? On the TV, Li Tianlan asked slowly. Qin Weibai sat quietly on the old sofa, and the corners of her eyes and eyebrows seemed to become gentle at this moment. I'm here. Looking at the TV, Qin Weibai said softly. He can't hear me. Evil sat on the other side of the sofa, squinting at the TV. Is second sister-in-law worried? Qin Weibai glanced at Evil, arrogant and indifferent. Since second sister-in-law's little lover is so worried about her, I don't mind helping him. Evil looked at Qin Weibai and said with a smile, I just talked to second brother on the phone. He was very surprised to know that you are here as a guest. He asked me to end things here immediately and bring you and Li Tianlan back to East Island. So, if there are no accidents, you will see him soon. Actually, it doesn't have to be like this. Evil chuckled and said, if second sister-in-law didn't transfer the luck of the Jiang family gathered in Zhongzhou State to Li Tianlan in some way, we wouldn't care about his life or death. Speaking of this, you asked for it. You sound very confident. Then why don't you go and catch him? Qin Weibai asked in a flat tone. Evil seemed to be stumped by the question. He thought about it carefully for a while, then shook his head and said, I don't know why. He's obviously a nonentity, but he gives me a dangerous feeling. Although I'm a killer, I don't want to take too many risks. It's the same now. But now, you're in my hands. With such an important bargaining chip, everything will be easy. Second sister-in-law, you'd better hurry up and finish eating. Then I'll take you to the battlefield. With you there, what can Li Tianlan do? We can go now. Qin Weibai wiped the corner of her mouth with a tissue and said softly. Evil was stunned. He looked at Qin Weibai and said seriously, you don't seem to be worried. He will die. Even if he can survive, in our hands, his life will be worse than death. In your hands? Qin Weibai sneered, you don't deserve it. She turned her head and looked at the TV. On the TV, a man in white was moving high in the sky. The white clothes were very white, like snow without any impurities. Qin Weibai looked at it quietly. Through the TV, she felt the madness. The madness at all costs. Her eyes began to blur, as if she had returned to the snowy night in Kunlun Mountain in her dream. The same white clothes. The heavy snow. The same waves of enemies. In the dream, the pictures flashed quickly and clearly. The white clothes, the sword, the smile, the helpless and self-deprecating face, the pride that despised the world, and the eternal loneliness. There was blood and snow in the dream. Red and white. It turned out that after the extreme glory became lonely at the end of fate, the feeling was not bleak and sad, but only despair. The most painful despair was pure despair. Qin Weibai's face was pale, but her eyes quickly became clear and cold. Let's go. She stood up and walked to the door. Evil narrowed his eyes behind her and suddenly chuckled. The first beauty of Zhongzhou State can't wait to join our Jiang family of South America. I'm really flattered. The first beauty of Zhongzhou State. Qin Weibai suddenly turned around and looked at Evil. Are you talking about me? What else? Evil shrugged. I don't like this title. Qin Weibai shook her head slowly and firmly and said, and I'm not the first beauty of Zhongzhou State. If you're not, then who is? Evil's eyes were playful. If there is a woman more beautiful than second sister-in-law, I really want to see it. Does such a woman really exist? Who is she? Yes. Qin Weibai nodded indifferently. She turned around and walked out of the door, saying calmly, Phoenix Pavilion, Gu Xianyan, code name Red. Chapter 246. The moment the last trace of darkness was dispelled, Shinichi Miyamoto raised his palm. There was no hesitation or pause, just a plain, simple, not high-pitched command that echoed in the sky. Attack. There was no need to hesitate to attack. For Shinichi Miyamoto, no matter if there was a follow-up after the Battle of Changdao, Zhongzhou State would not be a friend. So, attack and knock them out first. The figures all over the mountains and plains moved with a loud bang. But Li Tianlan was the first to move. In the heavy rain, the white shadow was full of incomparable decisive momentum. He was getting faster and faster, and his momentum was getting more and more violent. A man's charge. In the rain curtain where the darkness receded and the light came, a blazing torrent suddenly lit up in the sky. Wisps of lightning flashed in the fiery red torrent, spreading from the sky to the ground, shining the brightest light in the dark afterglow. With the silver sky halberd in hand, Li Tianlan rushed into the enemy group in an instant along with the violent torrent. The rain kept falling from the sky. The torrent in the sky was boiling. The torrent of hundreds of meters was mighty and hot, covering the enemy group in a very short time, like a Milky Way falling from the sky. Kill! Boundless flames were ignited in the overwhelming rain. In the dazzling light, Li Tianlan waved the sky halberd in his hand crazily. The raging fire whistled in the enemy group with the halberd, and the murderous intent was monstrous. The silent battlefield, the messy rainstorm, and the raging fire. A man's charge, and countless people's retreat. At this moment, no one would be able to forget this scene, because in this almost deathly silent battlefield, only the place where the white figure was so vivid and bloody. It was a kind of momentum that could overwhelm thousands of soldiers and horses, arrogant and strong. Silver radiance blossomed unscrupulously in the blazing fire. Blood splashed up like waves in the fire. Trees collapsed one after another, and a large number of corpses were thrown into the sky. The crowd was in a state of panic and instinctively retreated. The white figure who was tightly surrounded was brimming with a hearty killing intent. The silver radiance that constantly shot up into the sky clearly conveyed a clear will to all the enemies. All of you. Non-entities. Kill him. Almost at the same time, Shinichi Miyamoto and the people in charge of the 5 superpowers stood in different positions and spoke in unison. Everyone's expression was gloomy and angry. Thousands of soldiers and horses were at the gate of the city, but a young man from Zhongzhou State was charging alone. For everyone, this was a disgrace. Shinichi Miyamoto even took a step forward, intending to do it himself. I'll go. A voice sounded behind Shinichi Miyamoto, and a pure white figure also rushed toward Li of a white shadow. Shinichi Miyamoto narrowed his eyes and said no more. Of Shinichi Miyamoto. He narrowed his eyes and said no more. In another position, of the Jiang family, Li of family, was also Miyamoto. Before joining the Jiang family of South America, Rose was the top agent of the highest level in Star State. She was best at sneak attacks and assassinations. Qin Weibai had fallen into the hands of the Jiang family of South America. Their only goal now was Li Tianlan. Apart from that, they had no other requests. For Rose, the sooner she brought Li Tianlan back, the better. The 2 top imperial guards, Glacier and Tide, were also moving, not toward Li Tianlan, but toward the village in front of them. The 2 of them walked in front of Shinichi Miyamoto and looked at the crowd in the village, which was clearly visible in the morning light. Zhongzhou State, do you dare to fight? Binghe said expressionlessly. He didn't mention names, and there was no need to. On this battlefield, every one of them was from Zhongzhou State. Do you dare to fight? Fight! A clear and melodious voice suddenly pierced through the clouds, and the person had yet to arrive. However, the sound continued to rumble high up in the sky. Wherever the voice passed, killing intent instantly filled the air. For everyone in Zhongzhou State, this voice was very familiar. This was the voice of Gongsun Qi, General of 9 Heavens of Zhongzhou State. His words were flat and cold, simple and simple. Kill them. There were no orders to retreat or break out of the encirclement. Instead, he killed them. The white figure who claimed to be a young prodigy was charging forward alone. One person was charging at the front. They were a country, so how could they retreat? How could he dare to retreat? Kill! In the village where the elites of Zhongzhou State gathered, there was a sudden burst of uniform roars. In the pouring rain, teams of elites rushed forward. With the village as the center, the entire battlefield instantly turned into an incomparably cruel meat grinder. Blood splattered and corpses flew everywhere. Flickering lights and shadows constantly spread and interweaved on the front line, flickering between light and dark, connecting into a line and combining into one. Zhongzhou State was behind. Li Tianlan was in front. Among the countless enemies, the silver sword intent broke out endlessly like a raging wave. The silver light drove the raging flame and drew natural arcs on the battlefield one after another. Blood kept splashing into the air. Li Tianlan, who was desperate, was overdrawing his body at all costs. His absolute willpower kept him in the most sober and indifferent state of killing. The cannon fodder, who were forced to the forefront by Shinichi Miyamoto, could only passively consume his strength. Advance. Advance in a straight line. The sky halberd had completely become a murderous weapon that reaped lives. On such a large-scale battlefield, when weapons of mass destruction were greatly limited, the effect of the 2-meter-long sky halberd was far better than any gun or sword. The halberd swept through the crowd, bringing with it a large amount of blood. The thick blood spilled on the ground along with the rain, and the land that gradually turned red was covered by light and shadows. Ice walls rose and broke around Li Tianlan one after another. Dense bullets shot from all directions, but they were constantly blocked by the ice walls. Li Tianlan's figure inside the ice walls was sometimes clear and sometimes blurred. Only his white clothes were still as white as snow, without any trace of blood. The enemies around him howled in despair and retreated. There were fewer and fewer people in front of Li Tianlan. Finally, there was only a man in white. Li Tianlan's expression grew calmer and even a little soft. Bai Yi, the right advisor of Wuji Palace, also in white, stood in front of Li Tianlan with a smile on his face, but his eyes were extremely cruel and indifferent. That's the end. He looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and said. Li Tianlan didn't stop walking toward Bai Yi. The distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer, but the East Island cannon fodder around them were desperately moving away. Where is she? Li Tianlan looked at Bai Yi and asked. I don't know. Bai Yi's tone was cold. Oh, Li Tianlan said, nodding and saying, then go to hell. He raised the long halberd. The silver flowing light was like a phantom. The moment Bai Yi's eyes flickered, the sky halberd had already chopped down in the air with sharp and heavy sword intent. Clang! A lot of sparks burst out at the moment when the weapons collided. Bai Yi subconsciously pulled out his saber and raised his arm. The saber blade was facing up and directly blocked Li Tianlan's chop. The majestic power fell from the sky. Bai Yi's body trembled violently, and his whole body suddenly became shorter. One strike. With just one strike, Bai Yi's feet directly sank into the ground. Li Tianlan's figure took 2 steps back in the air and tilted his head. I'm in a hurry. He said, compared with Yue Kong, you're still not good enough. Really? Bai Yi, whose feet and even his calves had sunk into the ground, sneered. His eyes were gloomy and weird. Yue Kong really died in your hands. You'll end up like him. Li Tianlan said calmly, I'll kill you now. The sky halberd pointed down. Li Tianlan stood in the air, shook his arm, and stabbed down in an instant. At this moment, the Silver Human Emperor and Li Tianlan seemed to have completely become one. The surging sword intent was replaced by the crazy killing intent. This wasn't any unique skill. It was power. Pure power. It was an indescribable momentum. Every move and every moment was filled with indomitable aggressiveness and determination. Bai Yi suddenly burst into laughter. He looked up at the silver light in the sky and jumped up from the ground. He swung the long saber into the air from below. A dark blue semicircular saber radiance suddenly appeared in the rain curtain. The saber radiance spread to the sky dozens of meters high, entangled with the raging fire under the silver light, and surged wildly. In the dazzling light and shadow, a man and a woman quietly passed through the fleeing East Island cannon fodder dozens of meters away. The rain curtain fell, and the light spread. The man and the woman who were moving toward the same place in different directions continued to move forward, but their figures gradually disappeared, and finally hid in the void. At such a delicate moment, the man and the woman who were not far away from each other seemed to notice each other's existence at the same time. They looked at each other, and their eyes were both cold. The man recognized the woman. That was Rose of the Jiang family of South America. Rose also recognized the man. Red Flame, the Grand Knight of Knights Templars. There was no doubt that this was a hunt. And the prey was Li Tianlan. This could be said to be a tacit understanding, but in essence, it was a competition. The battle continued. In the rain curtain, when the crisis broke out, who would win? Chapter 247. The saber light went from the bottom to the top. In the heavy rain, as the blade cut through the air, Bai Ye's whole body was completely covered by the surging lightning. The long saber was less than 1 meter long, but it seemed to be extended countless times by the lightning as it swam in the air. The blade rose in the heavy rain, and a natural semicircular arc of light suddenly appeared between heaven and earth. The faint blue arc of light filled the battlefield and went all the way up. The sharp killing intent and saber energy spread wildly. The saber light went up against the sky. The sea of fire fell from the sky. The white shadow and the silver light in the air had completely merged. Li Tianlan held the halberd and stabbed straight. As the sky halberd moved, the endless flame burning in the void instantly surged. It was mighty. The man and the halberd and the fire and the man. It went forward with indomitable will. The raging fire and the lightning blended in an instant. At this moment, all the power in Li Tianlan's body gathered together, and there was no way out. There was only a pair of eyes left in Bai Ye's sight. It was a pair of eyes as deep as the sea. The calm sea, the crazy waves. Boom! The lightning and the fire intertwined, and the sound of weapons colliding was like a roar. In the bright light and shadow, what went down was still going down. And what went up was also going down. The long saber in Bai Ye's hand, which was also famous in East Island, suddenly bent into a shocking arc. The weapons collided, the light and shadow collided, and the sound of the long saber breaking turned into a roar at the same time. A broken saber flew into the sky with the jumping lightning and fire. Bai Ye's figure was shrouded in flames, and he raised the broken saber above his head. The silver sky halberd stabbed the saber, and the power broke out endlessly. Li Tianlan fell from the sky, pushing Bai Ye's figure to keep sinking. In the confrontation between the thunder-shocking realm and the fire-flaming realm, the lightning had completely disappeared, and the fire had mostly dissipated, but the remaining light was burning more and more. The two fell from the sky, and the fire scattered everywhere. From a distance, they looked like burning falling stars. The stars crashed into the ground with an incomparably brutal momentum. The fire scattered everywhere. The raging flames had completely turned into magma, surging to the extreme with Li Tianlan as the center. When the human emperor pierced into the ground, the whole battlefield was shaking. Large tracts of land and turf flew into the sky in the heavy rain in the flying magma. deep crack spread unscrupulously on the ground. A big hole with a radius of nearly 20 meters appeared at the place where the two of them landed without warning. All the land nearby collapsed. For a moment, the soil, grass, trees, and dust on the ground all burst out. Bai Ye's figure disappeared. Just as he was about to hit the ground, his figure immediately became faint. The air was filled with the sound of saber lights slicing through the air. Unique technique, dark ambush. The human emperor in Li Tianlan's hands stabbed into the ground. In the earth-shaking scene, a broken saber suddenly appeared behind Li Tianlan. Bai Ye's expression was twisted. He raised the dagger with both hands and slashed at Li Tianlan's back. Before the bright light of the blade appeared, the broken saber filled with blue lightning had already appeared behind Li Tianlan. Fast, fierce, and secretive. This was the most powerful saber unique skill in the entire East Island. Under the saber light, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Swish! The blade slashed through, but it only smashed a black shadow. In a split second, Li Tianlan directly switched places with the shadow. He just moved sideways by one step and dodged the saber light. The human emperor suddenly swept horizontally and directly hit the blade of the retracted broken saber. The blade of the halberd swept past Bai Yi along the blade with a series of sparks. Under the heavy sword intent, Li Tianlan took a step forward and slashed fiercely with the human emperor. Bai Yi roared fiercely. He almost exerted the power of the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked to the extreme. The broken saber concentrated all its power and slashed crazily on the human emperor again and again. The fire and lightning became hot and bright and then dimmed and dissipated. The cycle repeated. Only the sword intent and the saber light were fighting and fighting against each other. He stepped forward. He moved forward. Li Tianlan's movements were extremely simple and extremely fast. In the chaotic air where the fire and lightning intertwined, countless shadows had already appeared around him before the heavy rain fell. The shadows froze his every subtle movement, looking clear and dazzling. Bai Yi was in a trance for a moment, and Li Tianlan had already stabbed in front of him with the silver blade. Bai Yi retreated quickly. Li Tianlan, who had the upper hand from the beginning, was even more aggressive. The moment Bai Yi retreated, Li Tianlan became completely violent in an instant. The fierce sword intent suddenly filled the sky and the earth. Li Tianlan's whole body was full of sword intent. The majestic sword intent roared wildly with the sky halberd. Like a deep sea with a raging tide, it pressed toward Bai Yi overwhelmingly. Li Tianlan stood in the center of the sword intent, resolute and seemingly flawless. Bai Yi retreated again and again. But Li Tianlan's killing intense soared almost out of control. The human emperor was blocked. Before Bai Yi could withdraw his saber, the silver halberd, which looked as heavy as a mountain, smashed down again with a fierce wind. It stabbed straight, chopped vertically, and swept horizontally. Li Tianlan's movements were not fancy, but the seemingly simple attacks gave people an irresistible feeling in the extremely smooth attacks. Firm and fierce. Incomparably firm and fierce. Bai Yi retreated faster and faster. He had wanted to take down Li Tianlan with all his strength, but now he was running away with all his strength. The battle became a suppression, a one-sided suppression. The silver human emperor almost recklessly ravaged the enemies in front of it. Bai Ye's figure rushed up to the sky. The faint blue light only shone for a second, and then he was directly smashed to the ground by Li Tianlan. One advancing and the other retreating, the two rushed into the nearby crowd of cannon fodder used to consume the physical strength of the elites of Zhongzhou state. Wherever Li Tianlan passed, the sword intent was endless. The sky halberd swung and swung in the crowd. In the blood rain all over the sky, there was an absurd feeling that there was no one there. The long saber in Bai Ye's hand was densely covered with cracks. Blood dripped from his perlicue to the raindrops. In front of him, Li Tianlan's white figure became clearer and clearer. He was moving forward. He was attacking. He was killing. Without any pause, the sky halberd waved, and all the enemies turned into flying flesh and blood. The blood seemed to stimulate Li Tianlan's heart. His eyes were blood red, and his killing intent was boiling. In a very short time, his killing intent seemed to have really reached the peak. Bai Ye's eyes flickered, and he suddenly clenched the long saber in his hand. Fight! The sky halberd smashed down. The heavy rain couldn't cover the sound of metal colliding. The long saber in Bai Ye's hand suddenly burst into pieces, and countless fragments exploded in the crowd with dazzling electric fire. Li Tianlan's arms shook, and the joints all over his body suddenly burst into a crisp sound. The sword intent all over the sky was condensed by him in front of the sky halberd. Straight thrust. This blow pierced through the wind and rain, as if it could break all the obstacles in the world. Bai Ye's blood-covered right hand was still raised forward. But the moment the long saber was broken, his left hand reached to his waist. The long spear came straight at him. Bai Ye's left hand suddenly moved. An exquisite soft sword appeared in his hand. The sword trembled and suddenly straightened. The winds suddenly rose. The two cannon fodder from East Island who were closest to Bai Yi staggered and fell to the ground in the sudden gust of wind. The heavy rain was blown aside by the gale. A fierce and violent sword intent suddenly lit up in the wind. The gale gathered into a wall in the sword intent. The unique skill of Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wall of Strong Wind. The sword intent flashed in the wind. A nearly 10-meter-high wind wall appeared in front of Bai Yi. He was the right advisor of Wuji Palace, Bai Yi. In terms of realm, his realm was not as good as Yuekong, the first guardian of Wuji Palace. But because of the long time, few people knew that Bai Yi, who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm, used to be the junior brother of Tianhai Wuji, the palace master of Wuji Palace. He was also from Jifeng Sword Raining School. So he not only had the unique skill of Wuji Palace, but also the unique skill of Jifeng Sword Raining School. Even because of his family background, he spent much more time studying swordsmanship than using sabers. Bai Yi was best at using the sword with his left hand. This was a fact that he almost forgot himself, or his trump card. He never thought that in today's environment, the sword technique that he hadn't used for many years would become the killer move against Li Tianlan. The gale roared and gathered. In his sight, Li Tianlan's white clothes fluttered violently with the wind. The silver halberd moved forward steadily and stabbed into the wind wall silently. The wind wall was completely broken in the turbulence. Several tornadoes were blown and scattered on the battlefield. Human Emperor was still moving forward. Bai Yi drew his sword. It was also a straight stab. The bright sword edge hit the tip of Human Emperor's spear. The soft sword bent slightly. With the help of the slight elasticity, Bai Ye's body flew to the surrounding crowd in an instant. The cannon fodder ran in panic on the battlefield. With the help of the small wind, Bai Ye's body seemed to be weightless, shuttling through the crowd without a pause. His figure was like lightning. The unique skill of Jifeng Sword Raining School, chasing wind and chasing moon. Li Tianlan's eyes focused. He had fought against the masters of Jifeng Sword Raining School. In the battle where he was ambushed by Jifeng Sword Raining School a few days ago, Wind Ghost, whom he killed, was one of the high-end combat forces of Jifeng Sword Raining School. The two stabs by Bai Yi just now looked ordinary, but Li Tianlan knew very well that it was the unique skill of Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wild Wind Cut. Bai Ye's strength was even stronger than that of Wind Ghost. After two wild wind cuts, the abundant sword intent was enough to condense a real wild wind. That was the real killer move. If he couldn't dodge it, he would face one of the most powerful sword moves in the dark world. Jifeng Sword Raining School. This move was known as the fiercest and most violent sword intent in the dark world. But Li Tianlan, who had experienced this move, knew very well that although this move pursued sword intent, it didn't pursue one's destruction. Instead, it created something similar to a sword domain while causing the greatest damage. Li Tianlan wanted to dodge the next wild wind, but Bai Yi kept moving in the crowd, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Li Tianlan couldn't lock on his position for a while. The killing intent flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes. The human emperor instantly shrank. The silver light split in his hands, and the sky halberds suddenly turned into two swords. The eighth blade, burning sky. In such a chaotic battlefield, this move could be said to be blessed by nature. The sharp and hot flames suddenly swirled in the battlefield. The sword light was like a dragon. Li Tianlan's body spun and flashed, rushing directly into the crowd. He was completely harvesting lives. The cannon fodder around him fell down one by one, and the distance between them shortened in the blink of an eye. Bai Yi shuttled through the crowd faster and faster. The soft sword in his hand was straight. Above the sword edge, the air was twisted in a shape visible to the naked eye. That was the wind that had accumulated power to the limit. As long as the wind hit Li Tianlan, Bai Yi was absolutely confident that he could kill Li Tianlan with a move of Jifeng sword. The sword light kept spinning. Bai Yi looked calm, watching the fiery red sword light getting closer and closer. 50 meters. 20 meters. 10 meters. The distance between life and death. Bai Yi's eyes suddenly contracted, and he was about to make a move. A dazzling light suddenly burst out in front of Li Tianlan. The air twisted quickly in front of him, and the transparent color was refracted into colorful light. The light was dense and messy, and finally turned into a dazzling white. A low and majestic voice rang in his ears. It was English. Li Tianlan didn't understand the meaning, but many people present did. It was a simple word. Redemption. It was the unique skill of Knights Templars, or the Vatican. Red Flame, one of the 8 Knights of Knights Templars, appeared above Li Tianlan in the air, expressionless. It was not Knights Templars' business to bring Li Tianlan back to Europe, but it was the will of His Majesty the Pope. Most of the experts in Knights Templars were true fanatics. Since Li Tianlan was related to the Pope's prophecy, Red Flame had to bring him back at all costs. But he also knew very well that with his current strength, he was not even a match for Li Tianlan. What's more, there was Rose from the Jiang family of South America nearby. If he wanted to take Li Tianlan away, he could only rely on Bai Yi for the time being. The light of redemption covered Li Tianlan's eyes. In an instant, there was a vast expanse in front of Li Tianlan. Bai Yi, who was looking for an opportunity, was ecstatic. The gale flowed on the blade, and Bai Yi rushed to the front. 5 meters. This was a distance that could almost determine everything. Bai Yi drew his sword. The fierce wind completely gushed out of the blade. Red Flame looked at it indifferently. In his perception, Rose, who had been hiding in the distance, rushed over quickly and appeared nearby. It seemed that she wanted to make a move. Red Flame narrowed his eyes and watched the battlefield, ready to make a move at any time. The fierce wind rose to the sky, sweeping the dazzling white light brought by redemption. Bai Yi raised his sword to gather strength. In the white light, at the moment when the gale was about to fall on Li Tianlan's figure suddenly became illusory. Disappeared. The smile on Bai Yi's face suddenly froze. 2 illusory and ethereal shadows suddenly appeared in front of him. The wind roared. The 2 shadows did not stop at all. They rushed forward against the wind in a nearly charging posture. Before Bai Yi could react, the shadows rushed into Bai Yi's body in an instant and then went out from behind him. The shadows dimmed for a moment and completely dissipated. But the silver edge in Li Tianlan's hand suddenly became clear. It was still a straight stab. Under the shadow of death, Bai Yi subconsciously wanted to avoid it. But as soon as he moved, he felt a sharp pain in his body. The pain swept through his whole body. Shadow formula. What was a shadow? Tribulation's shadow was killing intent, while Li Tianlan's shadow was sword intent. The shadow condensed by sword intent entered his body and broke out completely. It was enough to destroy everything in Bai Ye's body in the shortest time. Puff! Bai Ye's body moved. The human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand had already rushed over, and the broad blade of the halberd directly sank into his body. Li Tianlan's face was pale, but his eyes were cold and bright. Bai Ye's figure froze in place and stared at Li Tianlan. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, the sword intent in his body had broken out in an instant. With a muffled sound, Bai Ye's body exploded into a mist of blood with a boom. Li Tianlan's figure flashed. Red flame in the air finally reacted. He suddenly took a step forward, subconsciously trying to stop Li Tianlan from escaping. But Li Tianlan's figure flashed, and his whole body had appeared in front of Red Flame. He was so close, Red Flame was at a loss for a moment. At this moment, he could clearly feel Li Tianlan's weakness. After the shadow formula broke out, even Tribulation himself needed time to breathe to recover. But Li Tianlan rushed directly to his side at this time. A somewhat familiar object slipped out of Li Tianlan's wide sleeves. Li Tianlan reached out and held it. Red Flame, who was at a loss, suddenly narrowed his eyes, and his hair stood on end. He knew this thing. It was a gun, a pistol. Ordinary pistols could not hurt a master like Red Flame, but the one in Li Tianlan's hand was a famous gun in the whole dark world. However, although this gun was famous, it was often suppressed by another gun, so this gun had been ignored by many people intentionally or unintentionally. The gun that suppressed this gun was called Whisper. And the pistol in Li Tianlan's hand was called Grim Smile. The pistol that fell into Li Tianlan's hand when he chased after Heavenly Calamity in Zhongjing. The muzzle of Grim Smile was pressed against Red Flame's chest. Without a word of nonsense, Li Tianlan pulled the trigger in silence. There was a thunderclap in the fierce battlefield. Countless powerful special bullets burst out of the barrel almost at the same time. Blood burst out. A waterfall-like barrage of bullets suddenly rushed out behind Red Flame. Grim Smile opened fire with all its strength. In less than half a second all the bullets had been shot out. Red Flame. He was one of the 8 Knights of Knights Templars, a master at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Before he could say a word, his huge body fell directly to the ground. Li Tianlan didn't even look at him. He took a deep breath and suddenly clenched Human Emperor. His joints shook again. It seemed that because he used too much force, even his bones made a clear cracking sound. In the next second, Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The silver edge, with a natural arc, appeared directly above the head of Rose, who was rushing forward. The Human Emperor chopped down with a cold and murderous arc. There was no raging fire, but under the endless killing intent, the arc of light seemed to be huge and desperate. Everything happened too fast. Rose couldn't even stop her rushing forward. Li Tianlan's figure appeared in front of her. He could clearly feel the bones in his body cracking piece by piece as he slaughtered his way to the point of self-destruction. But at this moment, Li Tianlan was also extremely powerful. Regardless of everything. At this moment, no master at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm could withstand his blow. Blood flowed down naturally along the white clothes. Li Tianlan's clothes were as white as snow. He was in the air, but he had a kind of almost invincible majesty. Rose's face, which was not beautiful but gentle and graceful like a landscape painting, was full of dullness. At this moment, she could be completely sure that she couldn't resist this blow. Under such a strong attack, she didn't even have room to struggle. Under the silver edge, she was a nonentity. Her will could not be said to be weak, but everything turned around too fast. Just a second ago, she was still thinking about how to fight with Red Flame for the seriously injured and dying Li Tianlan. But the next second, Li Tianlan's attack, which was enough to destroy her, was already in front of her. Such a sharp turn directly made her heart completely collapse, and the fear of death emerged like never before. She closed her eyes in despair and screamed subconsciously, "I know where Boss Qin is." Buzz! Blood flew out. Li Tianlan suddenly stopped the Human Emperor in his hand. Chapter 248. Cold, indifferent, without sorrow or joy. Under the silver edge, Li Tianlan was full of despair. Rose looked at Li Tianlan, who stood in front of her with a halberd, in horror. Blood flowed down her face. Rose's face, which was not beautiful but gentle and comfortable, seemed to have countless worms wriggling slowly on her face, which was indescribably ferocious. The whole world seemed to be silent. Until Li Tianlan's voice sounded. Say it. Awe-inspiring, mighty, like a god. In this state, Li Tianlan was terrifying to the extreme. He was calm and crazy, hot and cold, and his every move had a killing momentum that could destroy everything. Blood dripped on the ground. Rose stroked her face. After a little buffer time, she seemed to regain her calmness. You ruined my face. Rose stared at Li Tianlan in front of her, and her eyes suddenly showed deep hatred. How dare you ruin my face? It's ugly. So be it. Li Tianlan's tone was cold. Where is she? I'll kill you. Rose seemed to be completely crazy in an instant. She opened her hands and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. An expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm fought desperately. Even if she was disorganized, her power could not be underestimated. Dense blue lightning burst out at the moment when Rose opened her hands. The lightning wrapped Rose's whole body, and the air twisted violently in front of her. An air vortex with a diameter of 100 meters suddenly formed, vast and cold. The whole vortex was completely filled with blue lightning in the blink of an eye. At the center of the vortex, Rose's body was like a big cocoon wrapped in lightning. Her sudden high-pitched scream was still spreading in the battlefield, but her whole body smashed directly toward Li Tianlan like a cannonball. She was determined, angry, desperate, and irrational. She was going to kill the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State in front of her. Even at the cost of her life. No one knew what this face meant to Rose. She was Jiang Qianyan's woman, or rather, Jiang Qianyan's pet. She was even more favored by the second master than the beautiful Moonlight, a superior of the half-step invincible realm. Jiang Qianyan liked to go crazy with her in the daytime or at night with the lights on. Her face was really not beautiful, but it was another extreme of gentleness and grace, which made men more infatuated. Jiang Qianyan liked to see her ecstatic expression when she climbed to the peak little by little, saying that it was as beautiful as a painting. But now, this painting had been destroyed. Rose couldn't imagine what would happen to her when she returned to the Jiang family of South America, and she didn't dare to think about it. The moment she felt the pain on her face, she went completely crazy. The huge gap made her instinctively want to kill the man who ruined her face at all costs. Even if I die, I must kill him. The huge vortex, which had been completely dyed by the blue electric light, was spinning wildly. Rose's whole body was like a streamer shooting out of the vortex, magnificent and gorgeous. It was a desperate attack that killed both the enemy and himself. There was no turning back now. This was the most brilliant moment in Rose's life, brilliant and decisive. But would the figure, which had been completely shrouded by the electric light, regret before he died? Li Tianlan stood on the ground and raised the sky halberd in his hand. The silver halberd pointed to the sky. The attack that had been stopped by force gathered power again, and the whole human emperor suddenly turned into a slightly trembling silver light. One was moving, and the other was still. The blue streamer rushed down without reservation. In an instant, a blue halo suddenly burst out of the place where Li Tianlan and Rose stood. The dazzling electric light flowed around, and the halo quickly expanded into a circle with a diameter of nearly 100 meters. All the turf, trees, and even the nearby cannon fodder were completely swallowed up at the first time and became nothingness in the swimming electric light. A large area of the ground sank, but in the blurred light and shadow, the white figure still stood, strong and proud. The light dissipated. The area around the two people fighting was already scorched. Li Tianlan stood where he was, holding the human emperor in his hand. The human emperor had become the most penetrating form of a spear. Rose's body hung on the tip of the spear, dripping with blood. Rose was still smiling, and her face was covered with blood. Her smile was ferocious and horrible, but her eyes were full of desolation and loneliness. Li Tianlan quietly stared into her eyes and said thoughtfully, "The Jiang family of South America." Li Tianlan knew something about the 5 dark forces that entered Changdao, but it was limited to their names. Ahem, Rose coughed softly. The silver spear that pierced her body didn't kill her immediately. She grabbed the human emperor with the last strength in her hands and said in a sad tone, "It's too late." "Ha, it's too late. So what if you know? An invincible realm expert guards Qin Weibai in person, and your woman will soon become the second madam of the Jiang family of South America. If I die, Jiang Qinyan will have a new toy." Her gentle and quiet eyes were vicious and cold. She looked at Li Tianlan and said word by word, "When the second master swallows the Samsara palace and gets tired of your woman, Qin Weibai will have many men." Bang! Li Tianlan didn't wait for her to finish. His arm shook suddenly, and the violent power shattered Rose's body in an instant. Blood spilled all over the sky. The Jiang family of South America. He stood where he was and said to himself again. Thick blood gushed out from the corner of his mouth. Li Tianlan closed his mouth tightly, so the blood began to flow from his nostrils and eyes, and then it was washed away by the heavy rain. He took a step forward, facing directly in the direction of the Jiang family of South America. The wind blew, and the lightning flashed. When the cannon fodder of East Island was consumed in large numbers, the thunder-shocking realm experts of East Island and the 5 forces finally entered the battlefield. Li Tianlan undoubtedly became the most conspicuous target. As soon as he took a step forward, several figures with strong killing intent rushed directly in front of him. Without any pause, several people attacked with all their strength. For Li Tianlan, this was not a war. But for everyone except him, it was a war right now. A fight to the death. The elites of Zhongzhou state roared and rushed out of the village at full speed. At this point, no one held back anymore. East Island united the 5 forces. In the case that the other side had an advantage in both cannon fodder and high-end combat capability, everyone here was an enemy. No one held back anymore. Everyone rushed out. Fighting for life and death. Fighting for Zhongzhou state. In front of them, the white figure that originally belonged to their camp was still charging alone. Behind him, a country went crazy. Hot blood was surging, and finally turned into a power that could burn everything. Blood rained on the battlefield. The sound of gunfire, rain, and sword light spread to every corner. In the front of the Zhongzhou state crowd, a figure that was as strong as a giant roared and rushed in Li Tianlan's direction. A large flame surged wildly around him, and the fiery red color had almost completely turned into a deep blue. That was Su Chu. Du Hanin, who had just joined Sai City, moved more and more gracefully. She flew around Su Chu, and the blue and red flames intertwined, sweeping everything in her way. The Eastern Theater of Operations was charging. Mount Shu was charging. Sai City was charging. Whether in terms of the number of people or high-end strength, if the 3 forces combined, they would play an important role in the camp of Zhongzhou state. As soon as the 3 forces rushed out of the village, they seemed to have a tacit understanding, or as if they had already informed each other. The 3 forces rushed in Li Tianlan's direction at the same time. So the entire army of Zhongzhou state was led to charge in Li Tianlan's direction. The sound of killing shook the sky. Li Tianlan was still outside the camp of Zhongzhou state, but at this time, he seemed to have become the center of the camp of Zhongzhou state. Without dispersing their forces, both the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun city were taking advantage of the situation. The rainstorm roared. The battlefield was extremely chaotic in an instant. In the chaos that no one cared too much about, some people in the elite camp of Zhongzhou state, who were all moving forward, began to retreat quietly. Retreat. To the left. To the right. The phalanx was originally very neat, but one by one, people kept leaving the battlefield sparsely. In the melee of thousands of people, this scene was so small that it was almost unnoticeable. This was the phalanx of the Eastern Theater of Operations of Zhongzhou State. At this time, the hundreds of fire-flaming realm experts that Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, gathered by emptying the resources of the Eastern Theater of Operations, began to retreat one by one. There were more and more people. Those who left the battlefield were still moving away. They retreated in different directions and finally rushed in the same direction. That direction was outside the battlefield. Phoenix in a fiery red dress was still standing beside a monument less than 10 kilometers away, as if she was waiting for something. No one noticed it. Ning Qiancheng, who rushed in the front, didn't notice it. Wang Xingxiao, who rushed in the front, didn't notice it either. The heir of the Wang family of Beihai now focused all his attention on Li Tianlan. The white robe danced like a dragon in the heavy rain with silver light. Every moment, there was amazing brilliance. It was a kind of glory that Wang Xingxiao was very familiar with. For nearly 20 years after the fall of the Li family, this glory had always belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. Even Kunlun City was a little inferior. But now, there was Li Tianlan. He single-handedly destroyed the No. 6 Theater of Operations of East Island and killed Yuekong, an expert a half-step to invincible realm. Now, under the watchful eyes of the public, 3 experts of the thunder-shocking realm died without a complete corpse. And Li Tianlan was less than 20 years old this year. How glorious was he? Wang Xingxiao pursed his lips. This glory was so glorious and dazzling. As the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, how could he let the people of the Li family monopolize the glory? Under the curtain of rain, the white figure was vaguely guiding the direction of Zhongzhou State's breakout. Wang Xingxiao suddenly laughed. He looked at Firmament beside him and said calmly, "Help me." Firmament turned around with a stunned expression. "Lend me some sword intent." Wang Xingxiao said calmly and directly took off the huge iron sword on his back. This sword was called Firmament. Not only did it have the same name as Firmament, but Wang Xingxiao's sword intent was also very close to that of Firmament and Firmament's sword. Firmament seemed to understand something. He looked at the huge sword in Wang Xingxiao's hand. This top expert of the half-step invincible realm of the Wang family of Beihai frowned, then nodded and said, "Okay." Wang Xingxiao laughed out loud. He dragged the heavy sword that was almost taller than him and ran wildly in the heavy rain. Even if Li Tianlan was dazzling, so what? In this battle, he had to tell everyone who was the number 1 expert of the young generation of Zhongzhou State. He had a sword. Even if he had to borrow a part of Firmament's sword intent, this sword was still his after all. Wang Xingxiao's figure rushed to the sky. The moment the huge sword was raised, the extremely dazzling blue lightning instantly connected heaven and earth. The storm stopped. There was only the rumbling of thunder high in the sky. Firmament looked at Wang Xingxiao, his body straightened, and the sword intent flashed away. The next second, all the sword intent in Wang Xingxiao's body burst out in the lightning. Firmament's sword intent reached the top of his head. With the help of the sword intent, Wang Xingxiao raised the sword edge very slowly. The roaring thunder stopped. Only Wang Xingxiao's clear and arrogant voice sounded between heaven and earth. 6 realms. The next second, all the people of the Wang family of Beihai roared as if they were crazy. 6 realms. The most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai was called 6 realms of reincarnation. It had dominated the dark world for hundreds of years, and no one could break it. Wang Xingxiao's sword was half a move. There was no reincarnation, only 6 realms. But half a move was enough. The unstoppable sword light suddenly pulled an arc hundreds of meters long between heaven and earth. The 2 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm of East Island who were closest to it didn't even have time to resist and were directly smashed into blood mist by the sword light. The sword light was mighty on the battlefield. The storm continued to fall. The sword intent in Wang Xingxiao didn't weaken, but became more and more majestic. Everywhere in the sky was a sea of blue. Wang Xingxiao stood in the air like a sun. The momentary brilliance attracted almost everyone's attention. In front of the battlefield, Li Tianlan just looked back and then continued to rush to the phalanx of the Jiang family of South America under the brilliance of the Wang family of Beihai. There was also another person who was not attracted by the sword light of the Wang family of Beihai. That person stood in the void far away, dressed in white. She stood quietly in the void, the long sword behind her trembled slightly, and her left hand gently held the gorgeous scarlet dagger with countless complex golden lines at her waist. She had been paying attention to Li Tianlan from beginning to end. The dagger in her hand was called mutual forgetting. But how could she forget? Chapter 249. The sword light spread in the sky, evaporated the rain, and covered the light. Under the 6 realms of the Wang family of Beihai, the whole battlefield was blue. The boundless sword intent boiled in the dark blue light, like a sudden gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, the sword intent of this sword had reached its peak. The flesh and blood of the 2 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm that were cut by the pure sword intent fell down. As the sword light condensed, it seemed to drive the whole world to roar together. Tiny electric lights intertwined. After being concentrated to the extreme, the light disappeared, but the blue was still there. Endless thunderbolts gathered toward Wang Xingxiao, and the blue spread in all directions. The firmament was edgeless. But as Wang Xingxiao raised the giant sword over his head with his arm, a dazzling sword light suddenly shone in the blue. The sky was full of killing intent. Wang Xingxiao stood steadily in the sky. With him as the center, endless thunderbolts spread out for hundreds of meters around him. The condensed sword light rose and fell like waves, and the whole dark blue light curtain was like a sea surrounding Wang Xingxiao. The sea was calm. For a moment, no one dared to move on the whole battlefield. Half of the 6 realms of reincarnation. As long as they thought of it, it was enough to make most people in the dark world feel numb. The light curtain in the sky did not disperse, and the heavy sword did not fall. At this time, Wang Xingxiao absolutely had a destructive power far beyond his realm. Who dared to stand in front of him? Wang Xingxiao raised the heavy sword with both hands. The heavy sword split the sky. He turned slightly. On the battlefield where light and shadows were messy and the rain was pouring and blood was splashing, the man and the sword faced Shinichi Miyamoto. There was a sudden wave in the silent battlefield. Everyone in Zhongzhou State felt their blood rush to the top of their heads. This was the demeanor of the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, the future invincible figure of Zhongzhou State. When Li Tianlan charged forward, almost instinctively, everyone's eyes were focused on Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao quietly looked at Shinichi Miyamoto outside the light curtain and slightly narrowed his eyes. Unfortunately, it's only half a move. His voice passed through the heavy rain. The light curtain gathered around him became calmer and calmer, like stagnant water. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes flickered. He and Wang Xingxiao were hundreds of meters apart, but in his sight, the sword edge was so close that it seemed to be right in front of him. He spoke softly, but as soon as he spoke, his pupils shrank. Li Tianlan didn't like nonsense, and neither did Wang Xingxiao. The battlefield had become a desperate situation, so they just had to kill. He held the firmament sword with both hands and silently cut through the void. The speed seemed fast yet slow, but the trajectory of the sword light as it tore through the void was filled with a kind of downright violence. The blue sea around Wang Xingxiao began to fluctuate. Under the firmament sword, a raging tide suddenly rose. Boom! A loud sound, as if the world had been smashed, rang out after the sword light, and the blue light curtain within a range of hundreds of meters was shattered by the peak of the sword. The sword will was boundless. There were thousands and tens of thousands of sword chi. The shattered light curtain was like a tide, crazily attacking the sky. Countless sword wills and sword chi suddenly merged into one. The shadow of a giant sword that spanned hundreds of meters appeared in the sky. Wang Xingxiao's sword fell. The giant sword rumbled through the sky, bringing with it a killing intent that could annihilate all living things as it came crashing down. This sword tore through the sky. It was indescribable. It was as if all the power and willpower were completely integrated into one with this sword. As the sword light chopped down, Wang Xingxiao's entire essence, qi, and spirit burst out unscrupulously with this sword in the most thorough way. Incisively and vividly. The most thorough outbreak. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were focused and wild. He used all his strength in this sword. This sword was desperate. The whistling sound of the giant sword filled all the ears. In a trance, Wang Xingxiao heard the sound of breaking inside his body. Left and right arms, left and right legs. The sound of breaking surged inside his limbs. In an instant, his whole body, which had been exhausted, suddenly burst out with a frightening power again. Pure power. He broke through. In the strongest sword move of his life, Wang Xingxiao broke through. What he broke through was not the realm. It was the second evolution of his wind and thunder veins. Faster speed, stronger power. Wang Xingxiao suddenly let out a long roar. Although his realm did not move forward, the second evolution of his wind and thunder veins almost doubled his overall strength. At this moment, he was just at the beginning of the thunder-shocking realm, but he was sure to tear apart most superiors of the half-step invincible realm. The sword intent that had climbed to the extreme seemed to break through the invisible shackles, and its power instantly grew stronger. Shinichi Miyamoto's face changed. In the face of this sword, he was not afraid, but for a moment he had the idea of avoiding its sharpness. He was the person in charge of the divine wind force, the palace master of Liuhua Palace. But to put it bluntly, he was a ninja. Even if he was an invincible realm ninja, defense and attack were not his strong points. When facing a super strong attack head-on, as a ninja, Shinichi Miyamoto's first thought was to dodge. But now, he could not retreat. Because he was the only superior of the invincible realm in the field, and because behind him were countless elite forces of the East Island's secret service system. The sword intent in the void converged, but the shadow of the giant sword became more and more real. Wang Xingxiao stood on the other side, hundreds of meters away, and cut the invincible realm with a sword. The mighty sword intent was like an avalanche. Shinichi Miyamoto took a step forward with cold eyes. In the face of this earth-shattering sword, he raised his hand. The giant sword fell. Shinichi Miyamoto's body shook, and he suddenly let out a roar. With Shinichi Miyamoto as the center, all the void around him within a radius of 100 meters was completely still. This was a domain. The domain that really belonged to the superior of the invincible realm. The void within a radius of 100 meters was formed. No enemy could invade. Shinichi Miyamoto's most powerful unique technique. The void was still. Boom. The shadow of the giant sword made a final explosion before it cut into the still void, and then the horrible sword instantly stopped moving. The giant sword fiercely cut the air around Shinichi Miyamoto, which was already different. In the domain, the shadow suddenly slowed down, and then became smaller. The shadow of hundreds of meters shrank to less than 100 meters in the blink of an eye, and then it was still shrinking violently. Endless blue lightning burst out in the shadow, and then disappeared in the blink of an eye. The void was still. In Shinichi Miyamoto's domain of the invincible realm, there was no thunderbolt, no raging fire, and no ice. There was only himself. The shadow of the giant sword kept shrinking, but the sword intent was getting colder and colder. The still void was still shaking crazily. The air around Shinichi Miyamoto was obviously twisted, unstable, and about to break. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes focused, and he instantly made a move. A punch. An ordinary fist suddenly brought up a fierce wind in the void. Shinichi Miyamoto's punch hit the shadow of the giant sword that had shrunk to less than 10 meters. The silent void was completely twisted. The still void and Wang Xingxiao's giant sword broke at the same time. The remaining sword light broke through the broken domain and rushed out like a tide. Shinichi Miyamoto was unscathed. The superior of the thunder-shocking realm beside him was unscathed. But the sharp sword intent roared in the crowd behind them. Blood burst out, and a large number of superiors of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm, who were elites in the special warfare system of East Island, exploded. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes suddenly straightened, and his killing intent instantly became violent. After the breakthrough of the wind and thunder veins, Wang Xingxiao became calmer and calmer, facing Shinichi Miyamoto's killing intent calmly. The Wang family of Beihai. Nothing more than that. Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and laughed in anger. He didn't even dare to look back at the losses behind him. Nothing more than that. Wang Xingxiao sneered. Give me another 5 years, and I'll kill you like a dog. How dare you? For a moment, all the superiors behind Shinichi Miyamoto were furious. But they just said it was presumptuous. No one dared to say it was arrogant. Who knew what Wang Xingxiao would be like in 5 years? Wang Xingxiao shook the sword and laughed wildly. The heavy and blunt firmament rose again. The blade trembled under the great force. This time, he was still pointing at Shinichi Miyamoto. Everyone, do you dare to come with me to kill him? Under the heavy sword of firmament, the superior of the half-step invincible realm of the Wang family of Beihai, was the first to stand out and roared, kill. The enchantress, Black Pupil, Wang Zhaoyang, the commander of the Shadow Sting army, and others stood out at the same time. Waving the heavy sword in the air, Wang Xingxiao roared and rushed directly to Shinichi Miyamoto like a cannonball. So bold. So arrogant. The morale of Zhongzhou State instantly rose again. First, he was treated rudely by Li Tianlan, and then he was provoked by Wang Xingxiao. Shinichi Miyamoto had been extremely angry. In his sight, Wang Xingxiao's figure was getting closer and closer. Shinichi Miyamoto no longer cared about his identity and face. He took a step forward and directly attacked. Go to hell. In the voice that echoed between heaven and earth, his figure appeared directly in front of Wang Xingxiao. A punch. Without a sound, the air was completely broken, and all the sounds disappeared completely. A big hand glowing with a transparent luster suddenly reached out from in front of Wang Xingxiao. The big hand moved forward and slapped hard on Shinichi Miyamoto's fist. A huge roar suddenly came from the silent void. Wang Xingxiao's figure suddenly sank under the impact of the huge force. A nearly transparent figure appeared in Wang Xingxiao's position. A man who looked like a young man or a middle-aged man appeared in front of Shinichi Miyamoto and said with a chuckle, Miyamoto, do you dare to fight with me? General of 9 Heavens of Zhongzhou State, Gongsun Qi. And the nearly transparent clothes on him were the 4 spirits' armor, which was famous in the dark world. Without saying a word, Shinichi Miyamoto directly rushed to Gongsun Qi. With Gongsun Qi's action, all the people of Zhongzhou State followed Wang Xingxiao. Just like at the beginning of the charge, people followed the people of Sai City to rush to Li Tianlan. It was the general trend that couldn't be stopped. The crowd collided and killed each other. Wang Xingxiao and Li Tianlan. Invisibly, they rushed in 2 directions on the battlefield. Fighting for a country. Fighting for a person. Fighting for a clan. Moving forward with indomitable will, you're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.